Chapter 836. Without her, he wouldn't be able to live. Jin Yun held her face tightly in his hands and breathed a sigh of relief into her heart, as well as his last hope. Emoa, don't leave me. Don't be so cruel. I just got you. I waited my whole life to get you, please. Don't be so cruel. Kim Yoon's tears flowed into the sea from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, a miracle happened. Gong Yimo, who was originally lifeless, suddenly took a deep breath. Then, she clung tightly to Kim Yoon and sucked the oxygen out of his mouth. Emoa. Kim Yoon widened his eyes. She was still alive. At this moment, whether it was fear, cowardice, or fear, they all disappeared. The pain of losing his love and the joy of regaining what he had lost made Kim Yoon hug her tightly. He wanted to never leave her again. The two of them were entangled in the water, and the gunshots on the surface of the water were incessant. The lights flickered, and the water seemed to separate two worlds. Finally, when the two of them came out of the water and gasped for breath, the chaos had subsided. The people on the boat had surrendered, and the people on the plane were surprised to find them. They lowered the ladder and came to rescue them. Gong Yimo had a hole in the thick book in her hand, and a bullet was embedded in it. Therefore, the sickle shot had only scratched her skin a little. Gong Yimo hugged Kim Yoon's neck tightly. Her heart couldn't calm down for a long time. She had almost lost her brother forever. Brother, are you willing to live on the island with me? Just the two of us forever. Her voice was hoarse, and it was filled with the fear of surviving a disaster. Kim Yoon hugged her tightly and closed his eyes. He had never thanked the heavens like this before. He thanked Emoa for not losing her. It was great that she was still alive, but he didn't want to experience this kind of fear a second time. Okay, let's go to the island. We'll live there in the future, and no one can separate us. Gong Yimo nodded and said after a while, What if Uncle doesn't agree? Kim Yoon said calmly, I will take care of him in his old age, but I will never forgive him for the rest of my life. Gong Yimo rubbed against her. What about Mommy? Bring her to the island. Let's live together, okay? Gong Yimo still wanted to say something, but Kim Yoon pushed her away and forced her to look into his eyes. As the plane approached, someone jumped into the water to rescue him. Hundreds of planes were circling in the sky, and dozens of boats surrounded the area. Everyone was nervous about the young master's safety. However, the young master only had eyes for the woman in front of him. His hair was wet from the seawater, and his eyes were shockingly bright under the searchlight. I'll promise you anything. I'll do whatever you want. If you want to travel around the world, I'll take my job with you. If you want to live on a small island, we'll go to the small island and never leave each other. You can have anything you want. I only want you. Can you swear? You will never leave me again. The hand that was holding her shoulders was trembling, and the water undulated. However, Gong Yimo could still clearly feel his fear. At that moment, all the fear in her heart disappeared. To be loved by someone without regard for anything, to be needed by someone so urgently, was such a blissful thing. Okay, I swear. Kim Yoon could not help but reveal a beautiful smile. He hugged Gong Yimo tightly again. That's great. We will never be separated again. The rescue continued, but the two people who were rescued were tightly hugging each other. They were really uncooperative 3 years later. Kim Yoon was carrying a travel bag on his back, a briefcase in his hand, and a female handbag on his arm. He was even carrying a pile of shopping bags. The surrounding women could not bear to see him like this. What a peerless beauty! Why didn't they keep such a handsome man at home? Instead, they wanted him to be a coolie? Their hearts ached. They really wanted to go over and share his burden. However, the person involved did not feel that this was a kind of torture. Kim Yoon revealed a gentle smile. The haze and loneliness between his eyebrows had long been dispelled. His facial features were exquisite, as if they were carefully sculpted by the hands of God. That little mole under his eye was especially charming and captivating. Any celebrity standing next to him would be overshadowed. In the shopping mall, the number of women surrounding him gradually increased. They all wanted to know who was torturing this handsome man. Moreover, looking at the pile of shopping bags filled with female products, it was obvious that the handsome man had a girlfriend. They did not know what kind of woman could suppress such a stunning beauty. Many women secretly touched up their makeup. If the handsome man's girlfriend was not good-looking, they would have a chance. At this moment, Gong Yimo ran over with an ice cream cone. Her appearance was like a ray of light. If Kim Yoon was said to be a seductive seductress, then this girl was like the most holy light in the world. Many of the beauties who were lurking around Kim Yoon saw Gong Yimo walk over to him in a floral dress and heard their hearts break. With such a stunning girlfriend, it was no wonder that they did not attract any attention when they walked around in front of him. I'm so tired. There are so many people in line. When Kim Yoon heard this, he immediately frowned. If I had known, I would have bought it for you. Immerse, are you tired? Do you want to sit down and rest? As Kim Yoon said this, he frowned with heartache. If it were not for the pile of things in his hands, he would have given her a loving hug. Everyone was speechless. They did not understand how tiring it was to buy ice cream. Gong Yimo pouted. After acting coquettishly for a while, she said, "It's okay. Hubby is the one who's tired. He just got off the plane and went shopping with me. How about this? Let's not buy it first. Let's go back to the hotel and rest." Kim Yoon nodded. Immerse will arrange it. Thus, Gong Yimo held his hand, and the two of them walked out sweetly. Gong Yimo gave Kim Yoon a bite of ice cream and asked coquettishly, "Hubby, let me carry my bag. You're sweating." Kim Yoon quickly gathered the things on his body. "No, what if I tire you out? We just got off the plane and walked for so long. You must be tired. I'm a man. This is nothing." Gong Yimo heard this and quickly tiptoed to give him a sweet kiss. "Hubby is the best." Kim Yoon's eyes lit up with happiness and quickly said, "Immerse, do you want to buy more? Is this enough? We have money. Don't scrimp. Your happiness is the most important thing." Gong Yimo licked the ice cream and said reluctantly, "Then let's buy another pair of shoes. We'll use it when we climb the mountain tomorrow." Yes. Immerse can buy anything she wants, as long as Immerse is happy. Gong Yimo could not help but say that sentence that she had to say more than 10 times every day. "Mwah! Hubby is the best." Their conversation was heard by the girls around them. One of the girls could no longer control herself and pinched her friend's neck as she roared, Why don't I have such a husband?" From afar, Gong Yimo smiled proudly when she heard this. Kim Yoon lowered his head and kissed her sweet little mouth. Because in this world, only MO is the cutest. Chapter 837. Yuchi was a country with a high degree of female happiness. Because their rulers were two handsome men, Si Wian tossed the memorial in his hand to Shang Mingxi and said helplessly, Why can't I play around like Gong Yimo? Why do I have to sit here and read these boring memorials?" Although it seemed a little disrespectful, Shang Mingxi still said it quietly. "I'm the one reading all the memorials, Si Wian." He waved his fiery red clothes and said after a while, Yes, you're a great contributor to Yuchi. Without you, Yuchi wouldn't be able to turn. Since you're so powerful, can I go out and play for 2 years before coming back?" The more he spoke, the more excited he became. "I heard that Gong Yimo went to the seaside and saw fish as big as a mountain. I really want to go." Shang Mingxi sat in the dark and read memorials, not even raising his head. "Go. When you come back, you'll realize that Yuchi has changed its surname." Si Wian pretended to be bitter. "Little Cici, you really don't know how to joke. You won't really take over my country just because of a disagreement, right?" Shang Mingxi finally raised his head to look at him, then lowered his head as if his eyes were hurt. Shang Mingxi felt stifled. Why did he have to serve such a person as his master? Look at Yuheng. Under Kim Yoon's governance, Kim Yoon was famous for being a benevolent ruler. Then there was Liu Yi. Because Dragon City Wuji was full of energy, his subordinates were also crazily reforming and developing. Their political achievements were on the rise. Not to mention Dayu State. Although the region often took Gong Yimo out to play, there were no loopholes at all. Only their ruler knew how to play every day. Shang Mingxi secretly swore in his heart. The little crown prince could never be raised to be like his father. Speaking of the little crown prince, a very cute little Shota ran over excitedly. He was already 6 years old. It was said that Gong Yimo gave birth to a daughter this year. It seemed like they could match a pair. Imperial Father, Imperial Father. Little Crown Prince seemed to have discovered something interesting and was eager to share it with Si Wuyin. Although this child was obtained by accident, when the Empress Dowager was still alive, it was because of this child that she decided to kill Si Wuyin and cultivate him as a new puppet. However, Si Wuyin treated him very well. Perhaps it was because he had lived a miserable life when he was young, but he would grant this child's every request. When he saw him enter, he immediately stood up from the dragon throne and hugged him in his arms. "Yo, little fellow, aren't you at the Imperial College right now? Why are you here?" The little guy looked very much like Si Wuyin, with red lips and white teeth. When he heard Si Wuyin's words, he immediately smiled. But before he could answer, a cold and gentle male voice came from behind his father. "That's right. I also want to know why His Highness the Crown Prince is still in class. Why is he here?" The little prince instantly stuttered. "Gigi Godfather is here too." If there was anyone the little prince was most afraid of, it would definitely be his godfather, Shang Mingxi. He was clearly smiling, but he could very gently punish him until he was hovering between life and death. Even Imperial Father couldn't do anything to him. Seeing that the child was afraid, Si Wuyin pulled him into his arms and glared at Shang Mingxi. "What are you doing? Do you know that you scared him?" Little Crown Prince saw this and shrank into Si Wuyin's arms with a frightened expression. That's right. Godfather looks so scary when he's not smiling." Shang Mingxi looked at the adult and child, the veins on his forehead bulging. Finally, he revealed his signature smile. However, before he could say anything, the little prince hugged Si Wuyin's neck with a wah. "Imperial Father, Godfather looks even scarier when he smiles." Shang Mingxi. Hearing the cheerful voices in the inner hall, the palace servant sighed. "Your Majesty, the relationship between the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister is really good." The other eunuch nodded repeatedly. "Wait a minute. Was there something strange mixed in?" "It doesn't matter as long as Yuqi is safe." On a boundless grassland, a handsome middle-aged man led a group of people and galloped on horseback. At the back of the group, a pony was running unsteadily. The middle-aged man stopped and glared at the little girl on the pony's back with a pair of deep blue eyes that were tinged with purple. "Ruimo, take a look at your horsemanship. Why don't you practice more?" A 13 to 14-year-old girl stuck out her tongue and rode the horse to Longqing Wuji's side with great effort. "Imperial Father, why can't I be like the Princess of Daiyu State and not leave the house every day? Going out to ride a horse would be too hot." "Okay." The middle-aged man, who was Longqing Wuji, frowned. "What are you talking about? How can Lu Ye's children not even know how to ride a horse?" "I know how to ride." The little girl raised her chin. "It's enough that I know how to ride. Imperial Father wants me to catch up to your speed." Longqing Wuji tried to control himself, but in the end he couldn't. "Why are you so useless? Jin's speed is already slow enough. You said that you want to be like the Princess of Daiyu State. That Princess of Gu State's riding skills are better than Jin's. Why don't you say it?" Longqing Ruimo stuck out her tongue and thought to herself. She was just a mortal. How could she be compared to that person who was said to have become an immortal? Isn't this making things difficult for her? Longqing Wuji thought of something and became depressed. He then said to the people behind him, "You guys continue. We will meet at Baiji Ranch later. Ruimo, follow Jin." Longqing Ruimo was afraid. What should she do? Imperial Father wouldn't punish her again, right? Don't. But she was frightened to find out that the direction of Imperial Father didn't seem to be the ancestral hall where they were locked up, but the God Eagle Temple. Very quickly, they arrived at the God Eagle Temple. The God Eagle looked down on the earth with its wings spread out. The heart of the God Eagle was burning fiercely. Every Luyi person standing here could feel the greatness of the country and their own insignificance from the bottom of their heart. Ruimo was the same. She looked at the heart of the God Eagle with infatuation. If only I was born a few years earlier. I really hope to be able to light the heart of the God Eagle with my own hands. Longqing Wuji looked at the statue and seemed to remember that time when he held up that girl and lit the stone heart. He couldn't help but say, "With her here, you won't have a chance." Ruemo pouted unhappily. Imperial father, you can't be so biased. Why can't I? Princess of Gu State was a princess, but she was also princess of Luyoke. Longqing Wuji glanced at her and suddenly said, she is skilled in martial arts, resourceful, kind, and benevolent. Tell me, which part of you are better than her? Ruemo touched her face proudly. I must be prettier than her. Longqing Wuji restrained himself. In the end, he didn't attack his daughter's pitiful self-esteem. Ruemo couldn't help but ask when she felt Longqing Wuji's deep sorrow. Princess of Gu State is so good. She even personally came to Lu Yi. Imperial father, why didn't you keep her back then? Longqing Wuji suddenly closed his eyes. Because back then, he promised Gong Dai that as long as he helped, he would let go. Swallowing the bitterness, Longqing Wuji smiled bitterly. There is no why. Children shouldn't ask so many questions. Ruemo was unconvinced. However, Princess of Gu State was recognized as a saint by the 4 countries. She didn't dare to say anything overboard. She only asked, I heard that Princess of Gu State went out to sea to become an immortal. Imperial father, do you miss her? Longqing Wuji walked in front and didn't answer. Miss her? Yes. He couldn't help but touch his chest. The nameplate that belonged to Gong Yimo was warm to the touch. She finally smiled. At least she would accompany him forever in another way. That was enough. Chapter 838. When they first met in the cold palace, he remembered very clearly that the murderous gaze was focused on him at first. He was startled before it landed on his imperial father. At that time, Gong Che felt as if someone was ruthlessly clutching his heart. For a moment, he felt as if he couldn't breathe. The ground was littered with corpses, the blood, and the cruel girl. This should be what he hated the most, but at that moment, that pair of eyes was deeply imprinted in his mind and could never be erased. Gong Che's dream was very unstable. The scenes kept changing. One moment, it was the scene where Mo kissed him in order to save him. In the dream, he once again experienced that touch of softness. He was so nervous that he couldn't breathe. Then, the scene changed. It was before he went to build the canal. He finally recognized his feelings. When he hugged her tightly on the bed, that throbbing made him tremble. Although he was nervous and palpitating, it was really sweet. It was as if he wanted to get more from her. But later, she rejected him. Not only that, she even got together with someone else. He couldn't accept it. They were blood relatives. So why didn't she choose him? His love was definitely no less than Gong Dai's. He so longed to be with her. Finally, he made a big mistake because of jealousy. His imperial father died because of him. And in the end, in order to save the woman he loved, he carried her and fell off the cliff. The moment he fell, he felt liberated. He could finally hold her in his arms openly and tell her, I'm sorry, I still can't be your brother. Because he wanted to be her man. If he couldn't get her while he was alive, perhaps death would be a relief. But he still couldn't accept it. Why couldn't he have her? She said that it was because he had let her down in his previous life. It was unfair. Why did he have to suffer retribution in his previous life? It would be great if he could return to his previous life. When she still loved him, he would hold her tightly by his side. Mo or Gong Che kept calling out a woman's name in his sleep, but what he didn't know was that Gong Yimo was right beside him. Hearing this, her pretty face turned pale. Gong Yimo never thought that a man would change so quickly. Clearly, the day before yesterday, she thought that she and this man were in love and were about to get married. But the night before last, the night before the big wedding, he came to cancel the engagement. Only then did she know that Gong Che didn't like her at all. He liked those girls from famous families. He only married her because Uncle Emperor liked her. His heart ached. It was also good. She was able to extricate herself from this relationship in time. She was also glad that Gong Che had found his conscience and told her the truth at the last second. However, she did not expect that after she left, Gong Che would suddenly faint on the street. As Gong Yimo did not run far, she heard the commotion and turned back to take a look. she found that he had indeed suddenly fallen ill. He had a high fever, and it was very dangerous. During this time, Uncle Emperor came to take a look and postponed the wedding. But during the time that he was unconscious, he kept calling out a woman's name. Gong Yimo's heart turned cold. She came to Gong Che's side under an alias. Naturally, she thought that the MO that Gong Che was talking about was not her. What a joke. She liked him so much. It turned out that he already had someone he liked. He liked someone else, but still wanted to marry her? Was it because that woman didn't want to marry him? Was she so cheap that she could only be a substitute? Gong Yimo felt as if something in her heart had been broken and could not be pieced back together. Forget it. When she heard that he was sick, she angrily left and ran back. Then reality gave her a painful blow, and she no longer had any expectations. This was also good. At this time, the old eunuch De Fu walked in. Seeing that Gong Yimo's expression was not right, he understood the reason. The crown prince had been calling out another woman's name these past few days. That MO, or he didn't know who she was. This was the first time he saw the crown prince use such a painful tone to call out someone. It was as if he couldn't get her, but he had no choice but to toss and turn in bed. When Gong Che called out MO again, Gong Yimo could no longer bear the humiliation. She coldly threw the towel into the basin and stuffed a bottle of medicine into De Fu's hands. Take one of this medicine every day. I'm going to rest. Yes, Miss Shang. De Fu carefully took it. The medicine in Miss Shang's hands was better than the medicine that His Majesty had bestowed. But looking at Miss Shang's expression, it was no longer as lively as before. She must have been deeply hurt by His Highness's actions. But Miss Shang was really a good girl. She was so angry the night before and fainted when she heard that His Highness had chased her out. But in the end, she still came back and took care of His Highness for 2 days. Even the imperial physicians were not as attentive as her. If not for Miss Shang accompanying His Highness at all times, His Highness's illness would have been very aggressive. It was very likely that it would have accumulated into a knot, and he would be bedridden forever. When His Highness woke up, he had to talk about Miss Shang again. Hopefully, His Highness would change his mind. Gong Che did not know anything. He was still trapped in his dream. He only woke up in the afternoon. There was a faint scent of sandalwood. This was the calming scent that Gong Yimo had specially prepared for him. Sunlight shone in through the window, but there was no one in the room. Gong Che was still not used to his rebirth into his previous life. He slept for a few more days. When he woke up and saw the decadent Eastern Palace, he was stunned for a long time. His head was dizzy. He sat up and frowned as he rubbed his forehead. For a moment, he was not sure where he was or how long he had slept. Suddenly, many thoughts flashed through his mind. All the bones in his body were broken. Why was he still alive? Then, he suddenly remembered that he seemed to have come to another world. There was also a strange marriage, so he broke off the marriage. Then, he saw a woman who looked exactly like Immerse. She said that her name was Shangjun. The Shangjun that he wanted to marry was Immerse. Gong Che felt as though he was in a dream. He slapped his forehead hard twice. He was back? He was back in his previous life when Immerse liked him? After thinking it through, the sudden surprise knocked him out. He sat on the bed in a daze. But very quickly, he remembered that he seemed to have angered Immerse and made her run away. How could this be? Gong Che hurriedly got up. At this moment, the imperial physician and De Fu walked in. Seeing that Gong Che was awake, the imperial physician hurriedly said, "Your Highness was in danger this time. Even if you are awake, you can't get out of bed now. Your Highness, please go back to bed to rest." De Fu hurriedly supported Gong Che and said loudly, "Your Highness, you can just call this servant if you need anything. Why did you get up on your own?" How could Gong Che be in the mood to be entangled with them? But when he saw De Fu, he suddenly thought of something. He reached out and grabbed him tightly. "How long was I asleep? Where's Immerse? She really left? Where did she go?" It had to be said that the current Gong Che was a different person. His aura was shocking. Old eunuch De Fu was so frightened that he did not know whether to kneel or not. "Your Highness! Your Highness!" He scrunched up his old face and was about to cry. This servant does not know who is Miss Immerse. Chapter 839. Gong Che frowned and hurriedly said, "It's Shang Jun. Where is Shang Jun?" So he was looking for Miss Shang. The old eunuch was happy. His Highness had finally thought it through. He knew how good Miss Shang was. He smiled ingratiatingly. "Your Highness, don't be anxious. When she found out that you fainted, Miss Shang was very anxious. Not only did she come back, but she also guarded you for 2 days. She must be very tired now, so she went to rest." Gong Che's eyes lit up. "You didn't drive her away in anger? She came back again." Gong Che hurriedly pulled Defu out. "Where is she? Take me there quickly." Defu was baffled. Seeing Gong Che so anxious, he couldn't help but wonder if the Crown Prince was going to find trouble with Miss Shang. After all, the Crown Prince had always been indifferent to Miss Shang. Unlike today, he hesitated for a moment and said, "Your Highness, you haven't put on your coat. As the Crown Prince, how can you be undressed?" Only then did Gong Che see that he was wearing an inner garment. He frowned and was very anxious, but he didn't want to leave a bad impression in Mo's heart. But in the end, his desire to see her prevailed. He had to confirm that she was Mo. He couldn't wait a moment longer. The old eunuch saw that Gong Che wanted to go out without putting on his clothes and hurriedly stopped him. "Your Highness, Miss Shang has guarded you for 2 days and 2 nights. She must be exhausted. She finally has a chance to rest. Let her rest more. Besides, she's in the Eastern Palace. She can't run away." Gong Che was burning with anxiety. How could he be willing to wait? He glared fiercely at Defu with an unfriendly expression. "I want to see her. Now, immediately." Defu trembled. He didn't say anything and obediently led the way. He thought gloomily that His Highness still hadn't thought things through. His expression just now looked like he wanted to eat someone. Sigh. He really didn't want to see Miss Shang sad. Shang Jun's residence was very close to the Crown Prince. On the way, Gong Che quickly sorted out his thoughts. He remembered that Mo had told him that she had come to his side under an alias in her previous life. At that time, he was still depressed. In other words, the heavens had heard his prayers and sent him back to his previous life. At the thought of this, Gong Che wished he could punch himself. God was so kind to send him to the day before his wedding with Mo. This was supposed to be such a blissful thing, but he didn't understand the situation and did something wrong, causing Mo to misunderstand that he didn't want to marry her. How could he not want to marry her? He's wanted to marry her. He was even in his dreams. Gong Che walked quickly because he was in a hurry. Defu chased after him and shouted, "Your Highness, wait for this servant. It's not this way." Gong Che waited patiently for the old eunuch. He couldn't suppress his anxiety, anticipation, joy, and fear. Gong Che's expression became increasingly tense. Defu was so frightened that he thought he was going to harm Miss Shang. He couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, you're so anxious to find Miss Shang. Could it be that you want to talk about breaking off the engagement?" Gong Che was stunned. The old eunuch continued, "Your Highness, Miss Shang is already very sad. This servant saw her secretly crying last night. You want to break off the engagement the moment you wake up. Isn't this too cruel?" He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was obvious. It had to be said that this old eunuch was really kind. Gong Che felt terrible, but he couldn't say it out loud. He could only hope that he could apologize properly and beg Mo to forgive him. He secretly thought that Mo loved him very much in this life. She should forgive him soon and get married, right? Fortunately, he hadn't reported this to Imperial Father yet. Their engagement was still valid. When they finally reached the door, Gong Che became nervous. The afternoon sun was scorching hot. It shone on his forehead and made him sweat profusely. He seemed to be at a loss. Defu looked at him from the side and felt strange. "Your Highness, you aren't going in?" Gong Che was extremely nervous. His atoms apple bobbed twice, and then he glanced coldly at this meddlesome old eunuch. "You can leave." Defu was shocked. He felt that he had overstepped his boundaries. When he heard Gong Che's order, he quickly left. Gong Che then took a deep breath and pushed the door open. In the room, there was Mo's unique fragrance. His eyes lit up. He impatiently walked through the outer hall and arrived at Gong Yimo's boudoir. The moment he saw her, Gong Che held his breath. It was as if this was a dream, and if he moved too much, he would shatter the dream. Gong Yimo didn't seem to be sleeping well. She was frowning, and her eyes were red. It seemed like she had cried. When he thought that she was crying because of him, Gong Che wanted to slap himself. The person he yearned for day and night was right in front of him. And strangely, she was his fiancée. Was there a greater blessing than this? He actually dared to make her cry? If it wasn't for the fact that the timing wasn't right, Gong Che really wanted to beat himself up. Then he would kneel down and thank the heavens for their mercy. Finally, he carefully took 2 steps forward and carefully sat beside Gong Yimo's bed. He looked at Gong Yimo with fervent eyes. His breathing was hurried, and he didn't dare to reach out and touch her. His thoughts were still stuck in Immerse's rejection of his future life. So when he faced his fiancée, who was so close to him, his heart was in a mess. Only the fragrance from her body that kept entering his nose was so real. It was the smell that he had longed for 6 years. Gong Che didn't wake her up. He originally had a lot to say, but when he thought about how she hadn't slept for 2 days and 2 nights because of him, his heart was filled with heartache and sweetness. That sweetness made Gong Che suddenly smile. His originally gloomy, handsome face was instantly revealed because of this smile, and it was very charming. Finally, he couldn't help but lean over and sniff her scent up close. Gong Yimo was in a deep sleep. Because of her afternoon nap, her fair little face was flushed pink. Her little brows were slightly furrowed, as if she was upset about something. Her long eyelashes were trembling slightly, as if she was very uneasy. Her pale little mouth was slightly open, as if she was spitting out fragrant flower petals, inviting him to pluck them. Gong Che's heart was originally beating very fast, but when his eyes gradually focused on her lips, it beat even faster. He remembered her taste, remembered her sweetness. Although he stole and snatched every intimate moment, he still couldn't help but fall for her, because her taste drove him crazy. He couldn't help but lick his lips, and his eyes gradually turned dark red. He would just kiss her, and then when Immerse woke up, he would explain everything to her. He promised that he wouldn't do anything rash. While his mind was still thinking this, his body had already leaned over and gently, trembling, sucked on her lips. It was really so sweet, so blissful. Could it be that the heavens pitied him for not being able to get what he wanted in his life, so they gave him such a great gift? Mine Immerse, he was very reserved in his kiss. When he thought about how she was his fiancée, and how the person she liked was him, his desire grew stronger. He gradually couldn't control himself, and boldly probed into her slightly parted red lips. This was the first time he was so bold as to suck on her sweetness. Chapter 840. Gong Yimo suddenly groaned and woke up. She felt that her red lips were being violated, and Gong Yimo pushed him away without thinking. Gong Che was shocked to be suddenly pushed away. Seeing that Gong Yimo had woken up, he suddenly realized that he had lost control of his actions just now. Really, he had wanted to stop after tasting her. His entire body tensed up and he did not know how to face her. But when he thought that she was his fiancée and would be marrying him in 2 days, Gong Che could not help but feel sweet in his heart. He could not help but smile. "You're awake." His voice was very clean, very clear, and was as gentle as usual. But at this moment, Gong Yimo could hear the sweetness in his voice. She sat up strangely and stared at Gong Che vigilantly. All this time, other than the time she took the initiative to kiss Gong Che, they had never been intimate again. In that time, when she kissed Gong Che, he frowned slightly. Gong Yimo thought that she was too passionate and that ancient people could not stand this kind of passion, so they gradually restrained themselves. Now that she thought about it, it was because he did not like her at all. As expected, as long as a person understood one thing, they would be able to see everything clearly. Gong Che had never treated her differently, and she didn't know why she had thought that they were in love with each other before. "What are you doing?" Gong Yimo's tone was cold. This was very similar to how she had rejected him back then. Gong Che was a little flustered. Didn't she say that she loved him? Gong Yimo sneered and said, "Didn't you want to break off the engagement? Now you're harassing me again. What's the meaning of this? Do you think I'm someone who will come and go as you please?" Gong Che then realized that she was still angry. That's right, he was really stupid. He had not explained himself yet. Gong Che smiled again and sat closer to Gong Yimo. "No, I was drunk that day. What I said was nonsense." As he spoke, he carefully grabbed Gong Yimo's hand and slowly tightened his grip. He was so happy that he could actually touch Immerse's hand. "I don't want to break off the engagement. I like you. Immerse, will you marry me?" Gong Che's expression was infatuated, and his eyes were filled with uncontrollable emotions. But what he didn't expect was that the two words Immerse that came out of his mouth suddenly provoked Gong Yimo. She recalled that her name also had the word Immerse in it. Was Gong Che trying to use her as a substitute? She was bursting with anger. Why did she like such a man in the past? In the beginning, it was because her uncle Emperor married her. Now he wanted to be with her because of a name? Gong Yimo suddenly pulled her hand back. Gong Che did not know that his words had angered the other party. He saw that her brows were furrowed in anger. "Get out of here! Before I get angry, get out of my sight!" Gong Yimo spoke fiercely, but her eyes unconsciously turned red. Gong Che turned pale with fright. He wanted to explain, but seeing Immerse crying, he wanted to comfort her. But before he could say anything, Gong Yimo threw a bamboo pillow at him. "Get out! I don't want to see you right now." Gong Che was stunned by the other party's bamboo pillow. He did not think that Immerse would be so angry. However, this also showed that she really liked him, which was why she was so angry. Gong Che refused to leave, so Gong Yimo glared at him. Big drops of tears fell from her eyes, making Gong Che's heart ache. He wanted to go forward, but Gong Yimo turned her back and said in a hoarse voice, "If you don't leave, I won't talk to you anymore." She won't talk to him anymore. It was only now that Gong Che was afraid. If Immerse ignored him, he would definitely feel terrible. He thought that perhaps his attitude changed too quickly. Immerse did not believe him at all. Sigh. It was all his fault. Gong Che regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. There was nothing he could do now. He had no experience in comforting women. He only felt that perhaps he should let Immerse calm down at this time. Otherwise, Immerse would not listen to anything he said. So he said slowly, "Okay, I'll leave. Immerse, Jinjin, I'll come and see you later." Gong Yimo did not reply. Gong Che sighed and left reluctantly. He was still too young. Little did he know that when Gong Yimo saw that he really left, she felt more and more that Gong Che had ulterior motives for comforting her just now. She became even more upset. After Gong Che left, he was very upset. His fiancée was angry. How could he resolve this misunderstanding? But when he thought about how Immerse was angry because she cared about him, Gong Che felt sweet in his heart. Immerse liked him. She realized that she was not unhappy at all when he kissed her. It was obvious that she really loved him. In his heart, he had long been thinking of coaxing Immerse and quickly getting married. He had even thought of the name of their child. But Immerse seemed to be really angry. How could he comfort her? Gong Che's expression alternated between surprise, melancholy, annoyance, and sweetness. It scared DeFu, who was secretly peeping, to the point that he was horrified. He finally realized that there was something wrong with His Highness. Was His Highness possessed? Otherwise, why did he seem like a different person? After Gong Che returned to his residence, he finally had time to think about his own matters. He let the palace servants help him change his clothes while he closed his eyes and pondered. He was no longer the crown prince of the future, who was second only to one person and above everyone else. His imperial mother had hanged herself to death, and his family had all fallen from power. His position as the crown prince was unstable and unfulfilled. Gong Che thought of the dream he had when he was reborn. In the dream, he was 33 years old. With Immerse's help, he and Gong Dai had divided half of the country. Then he thought of the things he did to Immerse in the dream, and the regret he felt afterwards. Gong Che couldn't help but spurn himself. He didn't know how to cherish such a good girl. But it didn't matter. Whether it was the previous life or this life, karma was still reincarnation. This time, he came back. He wouldn't be stupid again. He was very clear about what he wanted. Thinking of this, Gong Che couldn't help but raise the corners of his lips. When he thought of how he was about to marry Immerse, his heart couldn't stop jumping and flipping, as if it was about to fly. The palace servants all felt a bit strange. Usually, the crown prince gave them a gentle and melancholic feeling. But today they felt that the crown prince was very dazzling. It was clearly the same face, but it was as if he was a different person. After Gong Che changed his clothes, he felt his body become light. In the bronze mirror, his appearance was very blurry. There were many things that Immerse had brought to him in the future. He didn't have them now, but it didn't matter. Immerse was here. Immerse was his. That was enough. He kept thinking about it. He thought that Immerse's anger should have subsided after half an hour, right? He missed her. After Gong Che tidied himself up, he once again went to Gong Yimo's place. But this time he learned his lesson. He brought a few of Immerse's favorite snacks. When he thought of the two of them getting married, he couldn't suppress his smile. Along the way, all the palace servants looked at him as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. Chapter 841. When they reached the door, Gong Che slowed down. He saw that the weather was just right. After he coaxed Immerse, they could go out for a walk. He couldn't wait to be with Immerse. Yes, he must coax her well. Gong Che knocked on the door. He carried the food box nervously and didn't let a single palace servant follow him. He was afraid that Immerse would be embarrassed if they were there. However, no one answered. Gong Che guessed that Immerse was still angry with him. He frowned and decided to apologize first. Immerse, Jinjin? Gong Che realized that he kept calling her by the wrong name, but it didn't matter. It was her anyway. He smiled and pressed his hand against the door, quietly listening to the movements inside. The carved door was a little old, and it faintly reflected the scene inside. It didn't matter if Gong Yimo didn't answer him. It was a good opportunity for him to finish speaking. Jinjin, I'm sorry to have made you sad. I didn't mean to. I drank too much and said some nonsense. Please don't take it to heart. Okay? It was still quiet inside. Gong Che saw that there was no one around, and his handsome face was slightly red as he continued speaking. I don't like any noble girl. In my eyes, they can't even compare to a strand of your hair. Jinjin, the one I like is you. This was the first time he had confessed in broad daylight. However, for happiness, what was shame? Gong Che said with a smile as he listened attentively to the movements inside. Jinjin, I didn't marry you because of imperial father. I've thought about it. Perhaps I'm not cut out to be an emperor. How about I leave the capital with you? In the future, we can be an ordinary immortal couple. No one can ever separate us again. This was what Gong Che had come up with after much deliberation. In his previous life, he had obtained everything: the country, beautiful women, power, and wealth. However, he was willing to exchange it all for Gong Yimo. Even if he lost his life, he wouldn't regret it. Then, in this life, what was he greedy for? As long as Immerse was around, he was willing to do anything. Gong Che had another plan in mind. That was, Gong Dai was in Beijing. In this life, Gong Ju was almost 18 years old. After coming out of the cold palace, in just a few years, he had become a frightening existence. His ambition was obvious, and he was aiming for the highest position. Most importantly, Gong Che's hand that was holding the lunchbox was a little wet. Most importantly, what if Immerse fell in love with Gong Dai? He admitted that his abilities were not as good as Gong Dai's, and his looks were not as beautiful as Gong Dai's, therefore he was afraid. He wanted to leave with Immerse. If Immerse said that she wanted to roam the world, they would roam the world. If Immerse wanted to live a carefree life, they would live a carefree life. He knew that it was selfish of him to do this, but to hand over Immerse and let her choose freely. It would be better to just kill him. Immerse liked him. In this life, he would not give anyone else a chance. Murderous intent flashed across Gong Che's eyes, but it was quickly covered by joy and sweetness. Really, what was he thinking? Even if he didn't do anything, Immerse would marry him in this life. What was he worried about? Immerse liked him. However, Gong Yimo did not reply. This made Gong Che a little anxious. He knocked on the door again. Jinjin? There was no response. Gong Che frowned, but he still spoke in a very gentle voice. Jinjin, I'm coming in. Seeing that she did not speak, he pushed the door open. As Gong Che walked in, he smiled and said, Jinjin, I brought your favorite snacks. You haven't eaten properly these 2 days, right? Eat something first, okay? When Gong Che walked into the house, full of anticipation, he realized that the windows were wide open. Where was Gong Yimo in the house? His expression changed immediately. Immerse, he shouted, but there was no response. The gentle smile from just now disappeared. At this moment, his expression was as cold as the king of hell. The food box fell to the ground with a bang, but he did not seem to feel it. Immerse was gone, but there was a letter on the table. He quickly walked forward and opened it. He realized that there were many words written on it, but they were all the same sentence. If you are heartless, I will leave. There were a few water stains on the paper. It was obvious that she was crying as she wrote. She was heartbroken. Gong Che was stunned and could not recover for a long time. What did Immerse mean? She said that he did not like her? Because he was heartless, she decided to leave? She did not even give him a chance to explain? No, she could not leave. Gong Che's expression was tense. He grabbed the letter and ran out, bumping into Defu. Your Highness. Your Highness? Where are you going? How could Gong Che have time to pay attention to him? But when he saw him, Gong Che suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said, Prepare the carriage. I want to enter the palace. Quickly. Defu was frightened by the crown prince's behavior and hurriedly went to prepare the sedan. Gong Che was burning with anxiety. He only hoped that he could arrive in time. His marriage with Immerse was bestowed by Imperial Father. In other words, even if Immerse wanted to leave, she must get Imperial Father's permission. Immerse had the golden token personally bestowed by Imperial Father. She must have entered the palace at this time. If she wanted to break off the engagement, he must stop her. Gong Che's guess was right. Gong Emo really did enter the palace at this time. She used her lightness skills, coupled with her gold medallion, and was able to meet the emperor unimpeded. She explained the reason in a few words. Then, she very seriously expressed that she wanted to break off the engagement. Break off the engagement? In the throne room, Emperor Chung was dressed in luxurious clothes. He looked strangely at the little girl below. Didn't she like Che very much? Why did she suddenly want to break off the marriage that she had painstakingly asked for? Is Che not good to you? This was the only reason Emperor Chung could think of. Gong Yimo shook her head. This humble girl has figured it out. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but her attitude was firm. So, what if she liked him? Now that she knew that Gong Che had no feelings for her, she would not force him. She lowered her head and said lightly, Only a noble girl is worthy of the crown prince. I'm just a commoner. I am not suitable. Your Majesty, please take back your order. Emperor Chung touched his chin and felt that it was somewhat interesting. Since that's the case, we will have to ask Che or what his intentions are. Gong Yimo suddenly shook her head. This humble girl wants to leave now. Your Majesty, you said that you would give me 3 promises. The first promise is that I asked to marry the crown prince. You agreed. This humble girl is very grateful. The second promise is that I want to break off the engagement. I know it's a little late to wake up now. If your Majesty is angry, I will accept your punishment. Now, I only ask that we have nothing to do with each other in the future. Emperor Chung was somewhat displeased. You go back on your words like this. If I promise you, where will the royal family's face go? Gong Yimo lowered her head deeply. My marriage with the crown prince is based on the 3 promises given by your Majesty. In other words, your Majesty's promise is worth 1,000 gold. The weight is higher than the marriage granted. Emperor Chung did not deny it and looked at her high and mighty. Little girl, what you said is not wrong, but how can I be sure that you will not use the 3rd promise to ask to marry the crown prince? No. Gong Yimo shook her head firmly, because I now intend to fulfill the 3rd promise from your Majesty. Chapter 842. Gong Chung slightly raised his eyebrows. Oh. Third promise. What do you want? If what you say is reasonable, Jin will agree to it. Gong Yimo couldn't figure out Gong Cheng's thoughts. She only knew that this uncle's temperament was not bad. At that time, he almost mistakenly took drugs, but because she stopped him in time and saved him, Gong Chung gave her 3 promises. Now it's time to end it, Gong Yimo said in a deep voice. After all, the Crown Prince is still the Crown Prince. So after today's engagement, I hope that your Majesty can grant the Crown Prince a marriage. Only a real noble lady is worthy of him. This is my 3rd request. Gong Cheng couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This girl, although she had seen through it, she was also heartbroken by Che. Even so, she still wholeheartedly thought of Che, which was really touching. At first, Gong Chung really wanted to punish her for going back on her words, but now this idea has faded. At least she didn't have the intention to harm others. Until the end, she still didn't forget to help others. It's really rare for a woman to have such a mind. In that case, you can get up. Jin will agree to it. Gong Yimo held back her tears and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Your Majesty." At this time, Changshi received some news. He stepped forward and whispered in Gong Cheng's ear. Gong Cheng slightly raised his eyebrows and looked at Gong Yimo. I heard that Che also arrived at the entrance of the palace. Little girl, do you want to see him? Gong Yimo trembled all over, but she remembered that Gong Che wanted to see her at this time. Maybe it was also to ask the emperor to cancel the engagement. What's the point of seeing him? So she shook her head. I will leave now. From now on, I will never see the crown prince again. Gong Chung was a little strange. Can Jin know why the little girl is so sad? His attitude was so firm. Gong Yimo looked up at him. Could it be that she wanted to say that the crown prince married her, just because the emperor liked her? Could she say that the crown prince's heart already belonged to someone else, and that he was calling that woman's name in his dreams? Gong Chung looked at Gong Yimo's pale little face and inexplicably felt a little distressed. He suppressed his curiosity and no longer asked. He just waved his hand. Okay, you can withdraw. Jin allows you two to never see each other again. Gong Yimo heard this and deeply bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. So be it. Leave this troublesome place. She missed home. She missed her master. Along the way, Gong Che was burning with anxiety. At this time, he was very angry that he did not have any martial arts. If his Qing Gong was outstanding, he would not have to wait so long. Immerse, you have to wait for me. It's not what you think. Why would he want to break off the engagement? How could he not like her? He wanted to marry her even in his dreams. Once he entered the palace, Gong Che headed straight for Zhaoyang Hall. This was the first time he had run madly without caring about his image in the inner court of the palace, all for the sake of seeing Immerse as soon as possible. As long as he could see her, everything would be fine. Gong Che's heart was filled with hope. He hoped that everything would be in time. He really couldn't accept the fact that he had wrongly pushed away the woman he loved in his second life. When Gong Chung heard that Gong Che was in a hurry to seek an audience, he felt a little strange. His son had always been steady and diligent. He would always do well in whatever he was given to him. He was always very well behaved. Why was he so unusual today? Therefore, with this kind of curiosity, Emperor Gong Chung generously received Gong Che directly. Gong Che strode in and actually forgot to salute. Instead, he looked around as if he was looking for someone. How dare you? Your Highness the Crown Prince. Why didn't you salute when you saw His Majesty? Changxi's voice pulled Gong Che back to his senses. Imperial Father? Changxi? That's great. They're still alive. But now is not the time to care about this. Gong Che asked anxiously while saluting. Imperial Father, just now did Immerse Jinjin come to see you? The emperor looked at him strangely. His son was indifferent and polite to everyone. It was the first time he saw him looking for someone so anxiously. Emperor Gong Chung slowly said, I saw her. Gong Che's eyes lit up. Without waiting for Emperor Gong Chung to shout, he stood up straight and looked at him expectantly. Where is Immerse? Imperial Father, will you allow us to see her? Emperor Gong Chung guessed that the little girl was almost at the palace gate, right? Anyway, he wasn't in a hurry, so he asked slowly, You want to see her? You have to answer a few questions first. Gong Che was very anxious. How could he have time to answer Emperor Gong Cheng's words now? But now was not the same as later. He was just a crown prince without external help and internal power. He could only ask urgently, "If I answer, can I see her?" Emperor Gong Chung raised his eyebrows again. He really felt that this son was very strange. He was so irritable, as if the sky was about to fall. That little girl wants to break off the engagement. What do you say? Gong Che's face turned pale when he heard this. He said almost without thinking, "You can't break off the engagement." He took a few steps forward and said quickly and nervously, "You can't break off the engagement, Imperial Father. This son likes her. This son won't break off the engagement even if I die." He wondered if Imo was hiding in the dark and eavesdropping. She shouldn't have left so quickly. Emperor Gong Chung thought it was really interesting. The young couple who was about to get married, the one who paid the most, ran over heartbroken and said that she wanted to break off the engagement, and the one who had been passive all this time suddenly said that she wouldn't break off the engagement even if she died. It was really interesting. Gong Che saw that Emperor Gong Chung didn't speak. He took a deep breath, adjusted his mood, and said word by word, "Imperial Father, this son was ignorant before and couldn't recognize my true feelings. Now this son knows what I want. This son won't break off the engagement even if I die. In addition, this son wants to take my fiancée back." She seems to have misunderstood this son, but the wedding date can go on as before. Emperor Gong Chung kept silent. This silence was simply driving Gong Che crazy. Imo must still be in the palace. She wouldn't be so cruel as to not even give him a chance to explain. It wasn't until Gong Che's forehead was covered with sweat that Emperor Gong Chung said with a bad heart, "I'm afraid it won't be as you wish because you're too late. Previously, that girl came to me to withdraw the decree, and we allowed it." At that moment, Gong Che almost fainted. He looked up at Emperor Gong Chung in disbelief. He really didn't expect that he was so close to marrying Imo, but the heavens would play such a big joke on him. Imo really broke off the engagement? Why? She clearly didn't resist his kiss before, and she was angry and sad because of him. She clearly liked him. As if the blow wasn't enough, Emperor Gong Chung said again, "She finally made a wish. We were grateful for her pure heart, so we allowed it." Gong Che looked up at him in a daze, hoping to hear a favorable turn from Emperor Gong Cheng's mouth. He didn't expect Emperor Gong Chung to say, "She said that as the crown prince, only the daughter of a noble family is worthy of you. We thought that we really owe you a lot over the years. Now that she's gone, we'll grant you a marriage of equal status. What do you think?" Gong Che only felt a fishy taste in his throat, and he couldn't speak. Emperor Gong Chung didn't notice his expression. Instead, he really thought of a suitable candidate. That daughter of the Su family has never been married. Although she's old, she's a famous beauty in the capital. Her father is the Marquis, so she's worthy to be your wife. Su family's daughter, Su Miaoan? Gong Che couldn't hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 843. Gong Che vomiting blood really frightened everyone. The smile on Gong Cheng's face instantly tightened, and Changshi subconsciously shouted, "Quickly summon the imperial physician." But at this time, Gong Che just wiped away his blood little by little. No need. His voice was hoarse and deeply dispirited. It seemed that after hearing what Gong Chung just said, even his vitality was sucked away by more than half. Gong Chung was anxious. His thick eyebrows tightened, and he angrily said, "What do you mean no need? Changshi, take the crown prince to the side hall. The imperial physician is here. Let him quickly diagnose." Before he finished speaking, Gong Che suddenly knelt down on one knee. "What are you doing?" Gong Chung frowned and looked at him strangely. Changshi was very perceptive and quickly withdrew with the other palace servants. "Imperial Father, this son wants to know where Shangzhen is now." Gong Chung saw that he wasn't worried about himself at all, but was still worried about that girl. He couldn't help but gloomily say, "She has already left. It's said that she went back to her sect." However, Gong Cheng didn't know where Gong Yimo's sect was, and he didn't know that this little girl he met by chance was his lost daughter. Knowing Gong Yimo's whereabouts, Gong Che was relieved. After the extreme pain, he calmed down. He thought very clearly Emole had feelings for him, but she misunderstood him. In that case, he should go and get her back. He raised his head and looked directly at the emperor. Imperial Father, do you really feel indebted to this son for these 20 years? Gong Che looked up at him. After vomiting blood, his lips were pale, but his eyes were clear. Gong Cheng's heart trembled, but Gong Che's appearance at this time was really distressing. Thinking that this son was usually the most worry-free, and today's abnormal behavior had a reason, he couldn't help but soften his voice. AI, don't worry. We'll make it up to you. The little girl is right. As the crown prince, you can't be so careless with your marriage. We will give you the marriage you deserve. When Gong Che heard his words, he slowly smiled. Does that mean that if I'm not the crown prince, I can cancel this marriage? Gong Sheng stared blankly for a moment, then became somewhat angry. What are you if not the crown prince? Have you lost your mind? Although he favored certain children, he had never thought of changing the crown prince. Gong Che pursed his lips. A trace of determination appeared on his handsome face as he kowtowed again. Father, please remove me from the position of crown prince. Because I have an unmentionable illness, I cannot be the ruler. He had actually revealed the biggest secret of his body. It took Gong Sheng a while to digest the meaning of his words, but he still couldn't help but ask seriously. What do you mean? After Gong Che bowed, he slowly stood up. His earlier impatience gradually disappeared, and he became gentle and calm again. He spoke with a calm attitude. I have an unmentionable illness. When the illness strikes, it's unbearable and easy to die suddenly. When Imperial Mother was still alive, in order to keep me as the crown prince, I did my best to conceal this secret. But now, I don't want to lie and deceive people anymore. Father, with my body, I can't be the crown prince. Gong Sheng was a little surprised. He didn't understand why Gong Che suddenly revealed his unmentionable illness at this time. Didn't he know that he would really lose the position of crown prince? Why? Gong Sheng frowned. Gong Che could have continued to hide it from everyone. Why did he have to say it himself? Gong Che smiled slowly. I just saw it. What's there to fight for with my body? I only hope that Imperial Father will see that I have been well-behaved for many years. Seeing that my Imperial Mother is dead and my family is in decline, perhaps I will keep my promise. Gong Sheng was stunned. He still didn't understand what was going on. Why was everyone so strange today? What do you want? Gong Che asked seriously. Gong Che coughed a few times, looking indescribably weak. My body is already an arrow at the end of its flight. I'm afraid I can't be filial by Imperial Father's side. I hope Imperial Father can send me to Yunding Mountain. I heard that Yunding Mountain gathers all the famous doctors in the world. I want to go there to recuperate and stay away from all the troubles. Gong Sheng saw that his expression didn't seem to be fake and couldn't help but be silent. At this time, the imperial physician came. Gong Sheng directly asked the imperial physician to diagnose in public. The imperial physician didn't know what was going on, but he still reached out to feel the crown prince's pulse. The crown prince was very cooperative. His expression was still, but there seemed to be light floating in his eyes. While waiting, Gong Sheng kept his eyes down and pondered. People like him couldn't just listen to what people said. He always had to figure out Gong Che's intentions more thoroughly. But no matter what he thought, this matter was harmful to Gong Che. What was Gong Che planning? Soon, the imperial physician was stunned. He looked strangely at Gong Che and carefully felt his pulse again. His expression was a little panicked. What should he do? He seemed to have discovered an incredible secret. How is it? Gong Sheng asked in a deep voice. The imperial physician's expression was tangled, hemming, and hawing. Gong Sheng was impatient and directly said, "There's no harm in saying it." The imperial physician then said, "Your Majesty, His Highness, seems to be congenitally deficient. He suffers from heart disease and is afraid of anger. It's easy to die suddenly." It was exactly the same as what Gong Che said. Gong Xing knew that the imperial physician wouldn't lie to him. So what Gong Che said was true? He couldn't help but feel tangled. Could it be that Gong Che really just felt that he couldn't be the crown prince, so he revealed this secret? But why didn't he say it earlier? He knew about Mount Yunding. It was quite famous among the people. More than 10 years ago, he even visited the palace. There didn't seem to be anything suspicious. So he could only ask Gong Che, "Do you really want to go to Mount Yunding and stay away from worldly affairs?" Gong Che nodded firmly yes. Although this son wants to do his best for Daiyu State, this congenital illness can't be cured, so I can only stay away from disputes. Perhaps I can live for a few more years. A trace of sadness appeared between his eyebrows. I've disappointed imperial father. Gong Sheng's heart clenched. He remembered that Gong Che was already 22 years old, but he still hadn't recovered from his illness. It was clear that this congenital illness really couldn't be cured. Moreover, he was quite ostracized by his brothers in the imperial court. Perhaps this was why he had the idea of staying away from worldly affairs. He really shouldn't have doubted him like that. Che, this child really didn't have it easy. After pondering for a long time, Gong Sheng said, "How can the world's famous doctors compare to the imperial physicians in the palace? Che, you should stay in the palace." Gong Che didn't directly object. Instead, he thought about it and said, "Although the palace is good, there are people coming and going, and there are many disputes. This son has completely lost hope in my body. I just want to live like an ordinary person and walk around. I heard that Mount Yunding has beautiful scenery, so I want to take a look." A trace of sorrow appeared on his pale face. "This son has never asked you for anything. Just this once, this is a small wish. Imperial father won't agree?" What else could Gong Sheng say after he said so? In the end, he only said, "If your body recovers, come back. Daiyu State will always be your home." Gong Che lowered his eyes and seemed to be very moved. "Yes, thank you, Imperial father." Chapter 844. Momo, look at this flower. Isn't it pretty? Qiu Xingfeng, who was dressed in white and looked like a celestial, approached Gong Yimo and was pushed away by her. "Go away, don't disturb me." After a while, "Momo, the snow at the top of the mountain is so beautiful. Let's go skiing. The skis you made last time are still here." Gong Yimo simply covered her head with a pillow. "I'm not going. It's annoying. Don't mind me." "Momo." Qiu Xingfeng bit his little paw. He was already 30 years old, but he acted like a 15 or 16-year-old boy when he acted cute. Unfortunately, Gong Yimo's face was covered by the soft pillow, and she couldn't see it. Acting cute was useless. Qiu Xingfeng was defeated. For some reason, after Momo came back from the mountain, she became very disheartened. He asked her if she was bullied, but she didn't say anything. Although he was very happy that Momo came back, he was also unhappy that Momo was unhappy. Suddenly, Qiu Xingfeng seemed to have thought of something and excitedly pushed Gong Yimo. "Oh right, Momo, there's a guest on the mountain today." In the past, Gong Yimo would tell Qiu Xingfeng everything that happened on the mountain. However, Gong Yimo was in a bad mood recently and didn't like to listen to gossip. Instead, Qiu Xingfeng ran out to find things that she might be interested in to tell her. Gong Yimo was a little curious, but it was only for a moment. It must be someone who came to ask for medicine again. Boring. Qiu Xingfeng continued. "I heard that he's a high-ranking official. Anyway, many attendants followed him, but they were all chased away by him. However, he seems to have a good temper. Master is playing chess with him." Gong Yimo didn't care. Anyway, no one could disturb her time. Let her die of old age, quietly like this. "Momo." Qiu Xingfeng was even more frustrated. How could he make Momo more energetic? Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He heard that the newcomer's body wasn't good, so he wanted to learn some martial arts to strengthen his body. Master wanted him to teach him, but he only wanted Momo as his disciple. He didn't want this strange person to be his disciple. But if he could find a disciple for Momo, it wouldn't be bad, Qiu Xingfeng suddenly said. "Momo, wait for me. I'll find something fun for you. Wait for me." With that, he ran away like a gust of wind. Gong Yimo didn't take it to heart at all. What was fun for her master was boring for her. She should just continue to waste her time. However, her heart still ached faintly. Whenever she thought about how she had been defeated by a girl who had the same name as her, she felt sad. This was the first time she had fallen in love with someone. Annoying. Gong Che was a bastard. Qiu Xingfeng went directly to the Heavenly Gate residence where his master, Qiu Zhongchan, was at. He disturbed the two who were playing chess. The person who came was Gong Che. He had heard long ago that Immerse had returned and was overjoyed. He was thinking about how to get close to her and resolve the misunderstanding, but before he could speak, he heard Qiu Xingfeng's voice. Master, I found a suitable person to teach this guest martial arts. Qiu Zhongchan liked this young disciple very much. He smiled and said, Why? You want to be lazy when I let you teach? Actually, he had his own considerations. The other party had a strong background, and only someone as pure as Qiu Xingfeng would be able to befriend him. Only then would Qiu Xingfeng bring no harm to Mount Yinding. Moreover, wind in nature was the most gentle technique and most suitable for Gong Che's body condition. Qiu Xingfeng's eyes widened. No, I want Mo to teach him. Anyway, I'll teach him Mo, and Mo will teach him. Isn't that the same as me teaching him? It had to be said that Qiu Xingfeng was very smart. Nonsense. Qiu Zhongchan smiled and shook his head. Immerse couldn't stay still for a moment. Moreover, her identity was special. When he brought her into the mountain, he knew that she wasn't the Emperor's biological daughter. However, this person in front of him was the Emperor's biological son. Just as he was about to reject, Gong Che suddenly said, Mo? Gong Yimo? Speaking of which, she's still my sister in name. Since that's the case, let her teach me. I'm very curious about her. This, Qiu Zhongchan still wanted to struggle, but Gong Che already couldn't wait to say it. Where is she? I want to pay her a visit. Qiu Xingfeng was very happy when he saw that the matter was settled. He hurriedly pulled him away. I'll take you there. Mo lives with me. With one sentence, Gong Che's smile froze on his face. He wanted to beat this master of Immerse to death. Not only did he call her name so intimately, they even lived together. This was simply unbearable. Qiu Zhongchan saw that he couldn't stop him and frowned. Forget it, Immerse was a smart girl. Nothing should happen to her. Should? Gong Yimo would never have thought that God would play her like this. Qiu Xingfeng ran into the courtyard and shouted loudly, Mo, master has assigned you a task. He very cleverly pushed everything to his master because he knew that Mo would do her best to do what his master ordered. Gong Yimo was annoyed, but when she heard his words, she still weakly replied, What task? If it was simple, she would let Qiu Xingfeng do it for her. She secretly planned in her heart. Qiu Xingfeng walked through the door, revealing his white teeth and smiling brightly. Master found you a disciple. Disciple? Gong Yimo sat up in shock. It couldn't be what she thought, right? She didn't want to train a group of little radishes. But before she could ask, another person walked in from behind the door. That person was wearing a moonlight robe. His posture was tall and straight, and he wore a jade hat and brocade boots. His handsome face was even more eye-catching. Seeing her, the person's eyes suddenly brightened, and he couldn't suppress the smile on his face. I'm Gong Che. Greetings, master. Gong Che's heart was pounding. That gentle attitude was as if it was the first time they met. Gong Yimo was stunned on the spot. This was Gong Che's twin brother? Qiu Xingfeng saw that Gong Yimo didn't object on the spot. In order to prevent her from flaring up, he quickly said, Mo, I'll leave your disciple here. You guys have a good time. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. You guys must have a good time. Before he finished speaking, he was already far away. After a long time, Gong Yimo, who was sitting in Cold Star Courtyard, let out a terrifying roar. Gong Che, you bastard, why are you here? Gong Che revealed a flattering smile. My fiancée ran away. I'm here to look for her. Bastard scumbag. Who said you're my fiancé? I already broke off the engagement. Gong Yimo glared at him fiercely, but her eyes were red. Gong Che blamed himself. Don't cry. Immerse. I'm here. Well, never. Bastard. You actually called me M.O. Gong Yimo was furious. At that moment, her hair stood up in anger. She kicked the door open and pointed angrily outside. Get lost, or I'll beat you to death. Chapter 845. It was only then that Gong Che understood why she was so angry. She had never told him what her name was. He kept calling her Immerse, so she would naturally misunderstand. Gong Che secretly scolded himself for being stupid. Seeing that he was about to be pushed out, he hurriedly used both hands to block the door and said anxiously, Jinjin, aren't you Immerse? I'm calling you. Gong Yimo was stunned. Then she slammed the door hard. Who are you lying to? Even a ghost wouldn't believe you. Gong Che was anxious. He didn't know how to explain this matter, so he could only avoid the main point and dwell on the trivial. It's true. Immerse, do you dare say that your name isn't Gong Yimo? Immerse, I'm really calling you. Gong Yimo frowned as she pressed against the door. Could it be that Gong Che was really calling her name in his sleep? But this didn't make sense at all. After all, she had never told him her real name. Also, and the most important point, Gong Yimo leaned against the door, and a trace of misery flashed across her expression. Gong Che was always indifferent to her. He couldn't have called her name so affectionately. It was fine that she couldn't see through it in the past, but after calming down, she discovered many details. All of them indicated that Gong Che had married her because he had no choice. Perhaps after marrying him for a long time, he would fall in love with her, but at least not now. If that was the case, why was he still looking for her? Could it be that he had other motives? Thinking of how extraordinary she occasionally was, could it be that Gong Che had discovered her ability? So he was anxious when he saw her run away. Was he just using her? At the thought of this possibility, Gong Yimo's expression became very frightening. Don't lie to me. I don't believe you anymore. You don't like me at all. No, Gong Che opened his mouth. He loved her. He loved her for 6 years and was willing to give up everything for her. You don't love me? Her voice was very calm because of her terrible fantasy. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been so cold when I was sick. You wouldn't have judged me by your own standards. When you were sick, I could have taken care of you without any care for my clothes. But you only helped me get the imperial physician and treated me like a normal friend. Gong Che couldn't explain the details of the past at all. He just wanted to slap himself. Gong Yimo pressed her back against the door, and her eyes gradually turned red. You've always been indifferent to me. I've tried every means to please you, but your attitude is always the same. Immerse, Gong Che really wanted to hold her in his arms and tell her his feelings loudly. How could she misunderstand him like this and misunderstand him more and more? It's all my fault. Open the door, and I'll tell you everything. Okay? What else is there to say? Gong Che suddenly became smart. Don't you want to know why my attitude changed so much? Why was I so cold to you back then? They all had their own difficulties. Open the door, and I'll tell you, okay? Gong Yimo hesitated and finally made up her mind. Whatever you want to say, you can say it outside. Immerse. Gong Che panicked. His tone suddenly became very sad. You said you like me, but why didn't you give me a chance to explain? I especially came to Yinding Mountain. Why didn't you give me a chance to speak? That lingering and painful voice sounded as if it was a huge mistake for her not to open the door. Gong Yimo couldn't help but soften. She thought, since the other party didn't know martial arts, what was she afraid of? So she loosened her grip, and Gong Che pushed the door open again. Gong Yimo didn't look at him, and only said coldly, say whatever you want to say. But the moment she finished speaking, Gong Che pulled her into his arms. Gong Yimo was shocked. When she looked up, her lips were sucked on by the other party. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment and quickly resisted, but she didn't use any internal energy. Gong Che pressed her against the door and kissed her deeply. Their breaths intertwined. Gong Yimo let out a whimper, but in the end, she didn't push him away. Gong Che was overjoyed. He quickly hugged the other party's soft body tightly, and then gently and carefully traced her lips, savoring her sweetness. Gong Che originally had a lot to say to explain, but the moment he saw her, he didn't want to think about anything else. He just wanted to kiss her. They hadn't seen each other for more than 10 days. He missed her so much. He loved her so much. How could one go to the ends of the world and down to the Yellow Springs be something that could be explained in a few words? Only by letting her feel it for herself. And when he felt that Immerse was gradually not resisting, Gong Che was so excited that his whole body went numb. He just wanted to hug her and kiss her until the end of time, looking at her gradually watery and helpless eyes. Those lightly trembling eyelashes made him crazily ravage her mouth without anyone teaching him how to do it. His hands tightened, as if he couldn't wait to merge into his arms. After the long kiss ended, both of them had rosy cheeks and were panting. Gong Che's gentle and handsome face was like a moisturized jade, emitting a seductive glow. His body was still tightly pressing Gong Yimo against the door, leaving no gap. After a while, he finally caught his breath and said hoarsely in her ear, "What do you want to ask? I'll answer you. But you have to hear me out, okay?" Gong Yimo gradually came back to her senses. When she thought about how she was forcefully kissed, and how it was such a kiss, her cheeks flushed red. She glared at Gong Che, but she didn't know that her gaze was coquettish and seductive. Gong Che couldn't hold it in. He lowered his head and kissed her again. That blissful sweetness made him dizzy, as if he was in a dream. Immerse didn't exclude his kiss. Immerse didn't even resist being in his arms. The intimacy he wanted didn't depend on stealing or snatching. This time Immerse was his. Although he had driven her away in anger, it didn't matter. He was here. Immerse, you can't run away. I won't let you run away again. As the kiss deepened, Gong Che's eyes turned dark red. This was a sign of his arousal. He didn't know it himself, but it pulled Gong Yimo back from her daze. "Your eyes," she pushed Gong Che away for a while. When he heard this, his thin lips curled up slightly. At this moment, he was no longer the depressed crown prince, but the person who was praised by future generations and almost became the emperor. His face was even more handsome because of his confidence. That handsomeness was even more seductive because of his dark red eyes. He had always been gentle and elegant, but when he was in front of her, it was as if he had unknowingly turned into a greedy demon. "My eyes turned red?" His voice was gentle and hoarse, but for some reason, it sounded a little demonic at this moment. Gong Yimo nodded and looked at him strangely. Gong Che's smile was actually so beautiful that it could turn all living things upside down. "Do you know why they turn red?" Gong Yimo was mesmerized by his radiant face and shook her head blankly. Her appearance pleased Gong Che. Immerse liked his face. "How nice." "Because I want you." His lowered voice was filled with endless ambiguity and hints. Chapter 846. Gong Yimo didn't understand at first, but after she did, she was embarrassed. Gong Che quickly looked in her eyes and coaxed, "But don't worry, before we get married, I won't touch you. But Immerse, I love you so much. Don't make me wait for too long, okay?" Those explicit words of love made Gong Yimo's scalp tingle. A person who was originally very cold and gentle, like a big brother next door, suddenly became so gentle and domineering. The contrast was too big. However, when Gong Che said those words, his expression was extremely serious. Those demonic red eyes stared at her without blinking, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo couldn't help but ask, "Then why were you so cold to me in the past?" After she came back, there was only one answer, and that was that Gong Che didn't like her. But now, she suddenly had a trace of hope and wanted to hear his explanation. Gong Che carefully hugged her waist. Hearing her words, the corners of his mouth lifted into a smile, but there was also a hint of bitterness. "Because in the past, I was stupid and couldn't recognize my own feelings." Gong Yimo didn't believe him and pouted. Gong Che hurriedly said, "Let me finish." He gently stroked her hair and said slowly and seriously, "Because in the past, my heart was higher than the sky. I always thought that as the crown prince, even if I didn't have any external help or internal power, I was still the pride of the heavens. How could I marry a woman with no background? So, even if you were very good and very cute, I still had prejudice against you. Gong Yimo was a little angry when she heard that, but before she could get angry, Gong Che lowered his head, closed his eyes, and kissed her forehead very gently. But I've already been punished, Immerse. The pain in his voice made Gong Yimo unable to get angry. When she looked up, she found that the affection in his eyes was like a net, tightly covering her, not giving her any chance to breathe. It was only when you left me that I realized what I had lost. Immerse, I'm sorry for my arrogance. I regret that I only realized my feelings for you so late. That's why I'm here. Can you please give me another chance? Gong Che's words weren't fake. He understood himself, and naturally understood what the Gong Che of this world was thinking. He just couldn't see through it. In fact, how could he not like Immerse? She was so beautiful, so quick-witted, so smart. He just thought that he shouldn't like a commoner, no matter how outstanding she was. These words, Gong Che, completely put, was he didn't want to lie, and he didn't want to lose her. So he'd tell the truth and ask for her forgiveness. Or with his current ability, he could come up with more perfect. He could come up with more perfect lies. Gong Yimo was stunned. She didn't think that Gong Che would say something like that. She understood Gong Che. She knew that he was a person who loved his reputation and cared a lot about his dignity. Gong Yimo had never thought that he would admit that he was arrogant and that his heart was higher than the sky just to get her forgiveness. But it was also inexplicably moving. She thought about it and couldn't help but ask, I didn't tell you my name. How did you know? Was the person you called when you were unconscious really me? Gong Yimo was very suspicious. Gong Che was a little annoyed. He didn't think that Immerse would be so angry because he called her name when he was unconscious. What a big mistake. It's a long story, but I can swear that the person I called in my dreams was definitely your name. His heart ached. He didn't think that there would be a day when he would have to prove his sincerity. His entire heart was with Immerse. How was he going to prove it? He hugged her tightly. I really love you. Will you marry me? When you weren't here, on the way to find you, I thought of countless possibilities. I really can't imagine that if I lost you because of this, what meaning would there be for me to live? Gong Yimo didn't think that there would be a day when she would hear Gong Che say this. She was stunned for a while before she gave a proud snort. Don't you want to be a good crown prince? How? Is it meaningless without me? She admitted that she was thinking too much, but her tone was already much better. Gong Che trembled slightly as he kissed the hair by her ear. A complicated look flashed through his eyes. She would never understand that he waited for her to look back once, but it never happened even after an entire lifetime. She also wouldn't understand that he loved her so much that he was willing to use his country and his life to exchange for her. He wouldn't be a good emperor if he was like this. I'm no longer the crown prince. Gong Yimo was shocked and quickly pushed him away. She looked at him and anxiously asked, What's going on here? It couldn't be that she had angered the emperor by breaking off the engagement, and he was taking revenge on her, right? Gong Che saw that she was nervous and smiled as he told her this. Don't worry, it has nothing to do with you. I have a hidden illness. When I came, I told Imperial Father that I can't be the ruler due to my illness. So Imperial Father allowed me to leave and come here to recuperate. Hidden illness? Gong Yimo was very smart. It has something to do with your eyes? Why are you so silly? Didn't you always want to be a good emperor? Why did you suddenly tell the emperor about this? She was a little flustered, but it made Gong Che's eyes flash with a gentle light. Finally, he reached out and pinched her nose. Because of you, he revealed a gentle and sweet smile. There was even a trace of red in his eyes. It was as if she was the only one in the world. My wife ran away. I wanted to chase after her, but the crown prince can't leave the capital, so I could only do this. His tone really did not sound like he was wronged. Gong Yimo did not believe him and hammered him. She did not believe that Gong Che loved her to the point of giving up his country. If you keep talking glibly, I won't be polite anymore. She was flustered by Gong Chei's teasing. She waved her little fist and pretended to be fierce as she spoke. Gong Chei quickly adjusted his expression. He slightly lowered his head and seriously looked at her as he spoke. Immerse, don't you want to travel the world and be a wanderer? You can sacrifice your wish to be by my side. So why can't I give up being the crown prince and wander the world with you? His tone was too serious, making it hard for anyone to doubt him. But was that possible? He was someone who was very cold to you before, but he suddenly had deep feelings for you? Gong Yimo revealed a confused expression. Gong Chei sighed in his heart, but he still lovingly touched her face. Immerse, don't think too much. Time will reveal a person's heart. You can test me, right? I will continue to live here and be your disciple. I'll leave the following days to Master to take care of me. After saying this, he did not wait for Gong Yimo's reply as he pulled her into his embrace and gently kissed her lips. She was simply too alluring, always making him impulsive. When he was intimate with her, it was like he had been shocked by electricity. There was a numb feeling that moved through his entire body. That numb feeling made his entire body tremble, but he did not want to leave at all. Instead, he wanted more. Chapter 847. Gong Yimo was dizzy from his kiss and accidentally opened her mouth, allowing him to deepen the kiss. The sound of water flowing could be heard from the room. This kind of kiss was unprecedented for both of them. It was novel and exciting. Gong Chei was so excited that he wanted to tear her apart and eat her up. She was so sweet, so beautiful, so fragrant. She didn't reject him at all. This was a scene that he had dreamed of. He didn't have to wait for her to fall asleep while she was drunk. He was kissing her when she was sober, and she accepted it. Was there anything more blissful than this? Gong Chei's kiss became more and more urgent, causing Gong Yimo to moan helplessly. However, that moan was like a seductive flame that instantly ignited the two of them. The two of them hugged and kissed tightly. They were inseparable. Gong Chei had overestimated his self-control as an old virgin in front of the woman he loved, especially since Immerse had always rejected him in the past. Suddenly, she allowed him to get close to her. This dreamlike bliss drove him crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his breathing became rapid. His hands hugged Gong Yimo tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo felt the other party's firmness. She blinked and suddenly pushed him away in embarrassment. Gong Chei was in a daze. After being pushed away, his first reaction was fear. He hurriedly asked, "What's wrong, Immerse? You don't like it when I kiss you? Did I do something wrong?" Gong Yimo gave him a hard stare. This guy, he's too enthusiastic. However, seeing that he didn't seem to be pretending, Gong Yimo's heart was filled with sweetness. She snorted, "You lecher. Didn't you say that you were going to give me a test of time? Look at you, your eyes are red again." Gong Chei then realized that he had been too impatient. He could only blame her for being so sweet that it drove him crazy. How could he have any self-control when it came to her? Gong Chei couldn't bear to part with her, so he continued to hug her and act coquettishly. "Immerse, I just missed you too much. Don't be angry. Can you let me hug you again?" Gong Yimo bit her lip and pushed him away firmly. "Umph. If I let you carry me again, you'll be carrying me to the bed. Let me tell you, you better behave yourself on Mount Yinding. I will supervise you." With that, she quickly opened the door with a red face and slipped away like a gust of wind. Gong Chei's arms were suddenly empty, which made him feel very uncomfortable. He was impatient. As long as Immerse was not his, he was afraid that someone would snatch her away. He wished he could hug her in his arms 24 hours a day. But when he thought about how Immerse liked him, he felt a little relieved. He just licked his swollen lips in embarrassment, and his heart was as sweet as honey. Immerse forgave him. He had to strike while the iron was hot and get his wife back. Thus, Gong Chei began his blissful pursuit of his wife. But soon he found his biggest obstacle. Because she understood Gong Chei's physical condition, Gong Yimo seriously prepared a series of fitness programs for him, including food therapy and medicinal baths. Of course, The task of food therapy and medicinal baths fell on Qiu Xingfeng, which made him very unhappy. Mo didn't care about him anymore. Mo's gaze was on that outsider. Damn it, this guy is here to snatch Mo. As Gong Yimo and Gong Chei's relationship got better, Qiu Xingfeng's sense of crisis also got heavier. Finally, when he found that bold outsider kissed Mo, Qiu Xingfeng's little universe exploded. Mo, let's go catch fireflies? Gong Yimo was reading a book. Hearing this, she raised her head and frowned slightly. But what should we do? I'm reading a medical book. Qiu Xingfeng was angry. His cheeks were puffed up with anger. Mo had never read medical books before. Then he pursed his lips and showed an aggrieved expression. Mo doesn't like me anymore. Mo only plays with that outsider and doesn't play with me anymore. Mo is a bad person. Gong Yimo was stunned. After all, she had been with Qiu Xingfeng for many years, and their relationship was very deep. Seeing that Qiu Xingfeng was sad, she quickly said, "All right, stop pretending, let's go catch fireflies." "What are you reading for?" She knew in her heart that medical skills were extensive and profound. It wasn't something that she could use after reading for a while. Moreover, her master was very important, and she didn't want her master to be sad. Therefore, the two of them happily went up the mountain to catch fireflies. Gong Chei was writing a letter in his room. Although he wasn't the crown prince anymore, Gong Chei knew that he couldn't be powerless. Otherwise, when the battle of the princes officially started, it would inevitably affect him. At that time, Mo would be in a very dangerous situation. He must have the strength to protect her. Therefore, Gong Chei began to use his own strength based on his experience in his previous life. Fortunately, after he took the initiative to give up the position of crown prince, his imperial father gave him a lot of men and horses. Now, they could be put to good use. After carefully considering his plan, Gong Chei felt that there were no flaws. Only then did he remember that he hadn't asked Mo for a goodnight kiss. This was a good opportunity to deepen their relationship. Gong Chei moved his sore shoulders and personally made some snacks. Then, he walked towards the Cold Star courtyard where Gong Yimo was. These snacks were made by himself when he had nothing to do in his previous life. He didn't like to eat sweets, but Mo liked them. So in his previous life, whenever he crazily missed her, he would make snacks. Unfortunately, at that time, she didn't belong to him, so she didn't taste the snacks he made. He occasionally ate the food he made. He didn't know if there was a problem with his taste buds. Although it was sweet, it tasted bitter. The bitterness spread to his heart, and his entire mouth became numb. But now it was different. Whatever Mo liked to eat, he would make it. Every time, Mo would proudly ask him to put it down and then eat it clean. He was satisfied from the bottom of his heart and ran to the kitchen even more frequently. But when he carried the food box to Mo's place, he found that she wasn't there. Gong Chei felt a little strange. It was so late. Where did she go? Coincidentally, a junior brother saw her and kindly told him, "Young master, are you here to look for senior sister?" Senior sister and martial uncle went to the mountain to play. They will probably come back tomorrow morning. This is a common thing. If you are not in a hurry, you can come back tomorrow. After saying that, the junior brother yawned and left. He inadvertently provoked the other party and then hid his achievements and fame. Gong Chei's face turned pale. What did he hear? Mo and Qiu Xingfeng went to the mountain to play, and they played for the whole night. And it was a common thing. Qiu Xingfeng was already 30 years old, but he still knew how to act cute and had an innocent face. He also secretly targeted him from time to time. Gong Chei frowned. This would be his biggest rival on the road to his wife. Gong Chei thought for a while and brought the secret guards and the food box to the mountain. He wanted to see how Qiu Xingfeng would not let go of Mo with him. Mo was his. Everyone who wanted to take his wife could only step over his dead body. Chapter 848. The full moon hung low in the sky. It was so close that it seemed like one could reach out and grab it. Under the moonlight, there were countless fireflies shuttling through the tall grass. Qiu Xingfeng used his qing gong and caught a bunch of fireflies. He placed them into a woven lantern, and a firefly lantern was completed. Gong Yimo sighed and sat at the side, thinking about life. Qiu Xingfeng handed the completed lantern to her and smiled brightly. "Come, Momo, this is for you." Gong Yimo couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, master." The faint fluorescent light and moonlight shone on Gong Yimo's face, dispelling the worry between her brows. Qiu Xingfeng saw that she liked it and was relieved. He felt that the most important person in Momo's heart was still him. That outsider was nothing. Who knew that Gong Yimo suddenly said something? "Master, do you think Gong Che is really good to me?" Recently, Gong Che had been behaving well, as if he was a different person. She was happy, but also felt a little guilty. She felt that his good feelings towards her came out of nowhere. Qiu Xingfeng was unhappy when Momo suddenly mentioned that annoying person. "He's not as good to you as I am." Gong Yimo laughed. "Yes, master is the best." But Qiu Xingfeng was still not satisfied. He rolled his eyes and suddenly kissed her on the cheek. Actually, to Qiu Xingfeng, his kiss was without any desire. He just felt that since Gong Che kissed him over, he wanted to kiss her too. But Gong Yimo was stunned, because this was the first time Qiu Xingfeng did this. After Qiu Xingfeng kissed her, he smacked his lips and snorted proudly. "It's nothing. If he can kiss, I can kiss too." Gong Yimo was speechless. Although she knew that Qiu Xingfeng was just a child who liked to compare, she still hit him hard. But this scene in Gong Che's eyes was like a bolt from the blue. He saw Qiu Xingfeng kiss him over from afar. For the first time, he hated his good eyesight. In fact, he knew that Qiu Xingfeng had a childish mentality, and he also knew that Immerse only saw him as a teacher. But seeing them so close, the jealousy in his heart instantly overturned. Gong Che felt that his whole body was soaked in vinegar. Even the secret guards could feel the thick sourness of his highness. But then again, no man would be able to remain calm after seeing such a scene. Killing intent flashed in Gong Che's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He couldn't be like this. Their relationship was already very good, and he shouldn't be so possessive. Otherwise, it would scare Immerse. After mentally preparing himself, he dismissed the shadow guard and walked over. As soon as Qiu Xingfeng saw Gong Che, he immediately became alert. Gong Yimo also felt strange seeing Gong Che. Usually, he would be asleep at this time. "What are you doing here?" Qiu Xingfeng asked rudely. Gong Che had already calmed down, but when he looked at Qiu Xingfeng, his eyes still narrowed. Finally, he revealed a gentle smile like a neighbor's brother. "I'm here to deliver supper to Immerse." Gong Yimo's eyes brightened. Gong Che's cooking was very much to her taste, but she didn't know when he learned to cook. Qiu Xingfeng saw that Gong Che successfully squeezed between him and Immerse and was very unhappy. He saw the snacks that the other took out and said disdainfully, "Isn't it just a few snacks? This is where Momo and I catch fireflies. You don't know how to catch fireflies, so why are you here?" "Teacher." Gong Yimo glared at her teacher. Gong Che's health wasn't good, and he didn't know martial arts. Wasn't this provoking? Qiu Xingfeng felt wronged. Momo was actually scolding him for this outsider. Gong Che acted as if he didn't hear anything. He calmly took out the snacks and arranged them one by one. Then, he pretended to say casually, "Little teacher, I heard from Taoist Qiu yesterday that his winter-autumn scripture disappeared. I think I saw it at your place before?" Qiu Xingfeng instantly exploded. Winter-autumn scripture? Didn't he destroy the corpse and erase the evidence? How did he know it was at his place? If he told his teacher, he would be in trouble. That scripture was a rare one, but he dropped it in the water. He stuttered, "I don't know what you're talking about." "What scripture?" I'm going to sleep. Good night, Momo." Then, as if afraid that Gong Che would say something else, he quickly slipped away. Gong Che was secretly pleased. He was just a child, and he wanted to fight with him? Gong Yimo chuckled. "Why are you so bad?" Teacher is very timid. He's most afraid of Taoist Qiu's ruler. Gong Che blinked innocently. "I'm also very timid." Gong Yimo was speechless, but she saw him say seriously, "When I think that I might like someone else, I'm so scared that I can't sleep at night." Momo, you can't scare me like this. Gong Yimo thought for a moment and knew who he was talking about. She was confused. What nonsense are you talking about? Teacher is my family. Gong Yimo glared at him, but saw him looking at her affectionately. Her face suddenly turned red. Also, who is the person you like? Annoying. Gong Che's skin was definitely thick enough to withstand the test. He hurriedly came over and said seriously, You. His voice was a bit low. Although I know that you only have family for Qiu Xingfeng, but he's handsome, simple, and strong in martial arts. My body is weak, and I don't know martial arts. Naturally, I feel inferior and not worthy of you. Gong Yimo didn't expect him to be so direct, but seeing the uneasiness in his eyes, her heart couldn't help but soften. You're not as bad as you say. Gong Che heard this and his eyes brightened. So Mo or still likes me, You're crazy. Gong Yimo didn't want to talk to him and turned her head away. But her eyes were flickering, and she was very shy. Gong Che's heart moved. He picked up a piece of red bean cake and put it in her mouth, saying softly, Come, Mo. I made this for you personally. It doesn't matter if I hate it. It didn't offend you. Just give me some face and eat a little more. Gong Yimo's scalp went numb from his raising. She didn't know why, but Gong Che was clearly gentle and refined, but she always felt that he was a bit domineering. Just like now, she had no choice but to take a small bite. Gong Che's gaze instantly became gentle. Then he put the remaining piece into his mouth and narrowed his eyes. It seemed like there was nothing wrong with his taste buds. The desserts he made were clearly sweet and not bitter. The night was dark and the mountains were high. There was no one around, and under such a beautiful night sky, a man and a woman alone. Gong Yimo felt a bit awkward. While eating the desserts, she secretly moved to the side. But how could her every move hide from Gong Che, who was closely following her? Gong Che blinked and suddenly reached out his hand to release all the fireflies in the lantern. Gong Yimo looked at him strangely, but she saw that he had already stood up. Under the moonlight, his figure was tall, like an immortal who was about to fly away, but his hand stubbornly held onto the lantern. Although I don't know martial arts, if you like fireflies, I can catch them. Chapter 849. Before Gong Yimo could say anything, Gong Che took the lantern and ran into the haystack. It looked like he was really going to make another firefly lantern for Gong Yimo. If Qiu Xingfeng used Qinggong to catch them, he could catch 20 to 30 in a few minutes. That would be enough. But for Gong Che, the process was very difficult. He had to concentrate and be very careful before he could catch one. Gong Yimo looked at him and suddenly felt like laughing. The haze that had been pressing on her body before dispersed bit by bit. Looking at Gong Che clumsily catching fireflies for her, she felt good as she ate the snacks. Gong Che completely threw away his image and focused on catching fireflies for Gong Yimo. He only had one thought in his mind. As long as it was what she wanted, he could do it well. When he finally caught 30 fireflies, enough to fill the lantern, he was already sweating profusely. Gong Che tried his best to adjust his breathing and tidied up his crown. Only then did he get out of the haystack and excitedly ask for credit. A long time had passed. Gong Yimo had already finished all the snacks that Gong Che brought. Seeing the lantern in front of her, she narrowed her eyes and smiled slightly. "More for you." Gong Che's expression was very calm, and he looked very light. Unfortunately, his silk coat had already been scratched by the leaves, and his hair was a bit messy. He looked very different from his previous immortal-like appearance. But he still didn't know it. Gong Yimo stood up and took the lantern in his hand. After Gong Che gave the lantern to her, he quickly put away his hand, trying not to let Gong Yimo see the scratches on his hand. Really, if he couldn't even do such a small thing, how could Immerse dislike him? Gong Yimo smiled slowly. "This is for me?" Gong Che looked up and only felt that her face was shockingly beautiful under the fluorescent light. After a long while, he finally regained his senses and nodded. Who knew that as soon as he nodded, Gong Yimo's hand loosened, and the lantern's gauze opened, and all the fireflies flew out. While Gong Che was still in a daze, the fireflies had already run away. Gong Yimo hugged the empty lantern and looked at him. She handed the lantern back to him innocently and asked softly, "Can you help me catch it again?" Gong Che looked at her deeply. Without another word, he took the lantern and went into the bushes. Gong Yimo smiled. "Aren't you angry?" As the crown prince, especially the crown prince who failed to achieve his goals. Gong Che's heart was fragile and sensitive. But the Gong Che in front of her, she deliberately tormented him, but he didn't say a word. Was it because their feelings were too deep, or because his ambitions were too great? But what did she have that was worth him giving up his dignity and trying to please her again and again? Perhaps it was because the first time was unfamiliar, but this time, Gong Che's speed was very fast. When he returned in front of Gong Yimo, panting, his hair crown was a little crooked. His white silk robe was a terrible sight, but his eyes were shockingly bright. "Immerse, for you." He firmly handed the lantern in his hand to her again. Gong Yimo took it with a playful expression. Then, without saying a word, she opened the gauze. Specks of fluorescent light flew out from between the two of them. Gong Che looked at her in astonishment. Gong Yimo guessed in her heart, "This time, you should be angry, right?" Who knew that Gong Che only took the lantern from her hand and said softly and seriously, "I'll catch more for you." When he said this, there wasn't a hint of anger or unwillingness. He just hurriedly turned around to catch the insects. He even wondered if he had done something wrong to make Imo or unhappy. Who knew that when he turned around, Gong Yimo hugged him from behind. This should be the first time she hugged him on her own initiative in both their lives. Gong Che's heart shook. He was stunned on the spot. He had been looking forward to this day, even in his dreams, but when this day really came, he felt like he was in a dream. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the fluorescent light danced in the air. He couldn't really be dreaming, right? Gong Yimo rested her head on Gong Che's back and rubbed it gently. She successfully felt Gong Che's body tense up. She felt that it was very fun. She used a little strength in her hand and turned Gong Che around to face her. The two of them stood very close to each other. Gong Che could almost see Gong Yimo's eyelashes clearly through the moonlight. He saw Gong Yimo tiptoe slightly and reach out to pull out the jade hairpin on his head. Without the support of the jade hairpin, his loose hair fell apart with the removal of the jade hairpin. In the blink of an eye, his black hair fell down and gently fluttered in the night wind. Gong Che blinked in confusion. Originally, in order to maintain the image of a crown prince, he had always dressed very strictly, wishing that there wasn't a single wrinkle on his clothes. Therefore, he exuded a sense of abstinence from the inside out. But now his outer clothes were torn and his black hair was fluttering. That gentle and handsome face suddenly revealed a demonic aura. Gong Yimo liked his current appearance. The two of them were very close to each other. Gong Che could smell the sweetness on Gong Yimo's body, and Gong Yimo could also smell the medicinal fragrance on Gong Che's body. As their breathing got closer, the air was filled with an ambiguous aura. Gong Che's heart was beating very fast. Just when he thought that Gong Yimo was going to kiss him, Gong Yimo suddenly said something. "You said that when you're aroused, your eyes turn red?" She smiled mischievously. "How about this? If your eyes turn red right now, I'll believe that you like me." As soon as her voice fell, Gong Che didn't understand what she meant. His body was bewitched as he hugged Gong Yimo's waist. And in the next second, after he understood Gong Yimo's meaning, he happily closed his eyes and forcefully sucked on her alluring red lips. This time, Gong Yimo was extremely cooperative and licked him back. Who knew that when she touched him, Gong Che was shocked and his eyes suddenly opened. Other than ecstasy, there was a strange dark red color that couldn't be hidden under the moonlight. He was aroused with just a kiss? Gong Yimo suddenly smiled and hugged his neck to fiercely kiss him. "Do you really like me?" Gong Yimo kept taking the initiative, which aroused Gong Che's sense of shame. His face flushed red, and he said hoarsely, I for a long time, and in the end, he sighed softly in Gong Yimo's ear. "I don't like you enough. I love you very much, very much." Gong Yimo proudly pinched his body that was stiff due to nervousness and impulse and smiled. Very much? How much do you love me? That's... Gong Chei's hands around her waist gradually tightened, and his chin rubbed against her shoulder impatiently. I love you very much. You're more important than the country, than power and status, than everything, even more important than my life. Do you know? To have the chance to love you, I'm so happy that it's like a dream. Words of love sounded sweet, but because Gong Chei's every word came from the bottom of his heart, Gong Yimo didn't feel mushy when she heard it. Instead, she felt her heart heat up. She thought that although Gong Chei had suddenly changed, he was still him, and feelings wouldn't lie. She should believe him. Chapter 850. Just like that, Gong Chei smoothly obtained his fiancée's approval. Even in his dreams, he had a smile on his face, as if it was inconceivable. Because she had decided to be together with Gong Chei, Gong Yimo forcefully rejected Gong Chei's overly intimate request. At most, they could only kiss, and it could only be a light taste. As a result, the two's marriage was postponed. Because Gong Chei was congenitally deficient, she was afraid that Gong Chei would be agitated and cause some terrible consequences. Gong Chei wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He repeatedly expressed that his body was not that delicate. Not only could he kiss, but he could also do more. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows in surprise. So you're saying that something has happened between you and another woman? Gong Chei quickly shook his head. In all honesty, other than being forced to marry Su Miaolon, he did not have any involvement with any other woman. Even if Su Miaolon stripped naked and stood in front of him, he would not have any reaction. However, this matter could not be known by Immerse. Otherwise, if Immerse got angry, he would have nowhere to cry. Gong Yimo saw him shake his head and smiled wickedly. Then on what basis do you say that your body can withstand sex? On what basis? Are you going to joke about your body? Gong Chei's gentle and handsome face cracked. What could he say to prove that his body was not in the way? Unfortunately, Gong Yimo did not listen to his explanations. If she said no, then no. It was fine if she did not know before, but now that she knew that his body was ill, how could she allow him to run amok? Moreover, he had been unconscious for 3 days. It was very likely that it was because he was anxious. At that time, the imperial physician said that his illness was dangerous. It was clear that he could not be careless. Gong Chei had no choice but to order his men to hurry up and find the water cloud grass. He knew that his illness could be cured with the water cloud grass. Moreover, there were famous doctors on Mount Yinding. He only needed to find the water cloud grass and give the people on Mount Yinding a hint. However, he didn't know if it was a matter of luck, but the fire cloud grass that Xiao Zhongchan needed could always be bought. Although it cost a lot of money, the water cloud grass that he wanted was nowhere to be found. In a flash, a year had passed. Gong Chei finally felt that something was amiss. However, in the past year, his assets had become very strong. In his previous life, he had used ships to make money, so he understood the logistics industry very well. Moreover, he had a more advanced shipbuilding concept. His ships could carry more goods and more people at a time. He had also used his authority to monopolize the logistics of a section of the Yangtze River. In the past year, his business had been doing well, but under such circumstances, he still couldn't buy the water cloud grass. It could only be said that he had been targeted, and that person he knew who it was. Gong Chei frowned slightly. He ordered his men to continue looking for the water cloud grass. He didn't believe that that person would continue to pester him. However, the fear in his heart couldn't lie. Gong Chei suddenly had a strong urge to see Gong Yimo. When he hurriedly went to look for her, he found that Gong Yimo was sparring with Qiu Xingfeng in the Tai Chi dojo. Her confident posture made her sword moves clean and neat. The current her didn't experience any hardships, so she was a little different from the future her. However, Gong Chei loved her so much. He selfishly felt that her current state was better. She didn't have to bear so much, and she didn't have so many missions and responsibilities. Her current happiness was simple and easy to satisfy. That was enough. He loved her as a person. He loved her no matter what she looked like. Seeing Gong Che coming, his white robe fluttering in the wind, his elegant and handsome appearance gave off a feeling of a jade-like stranger, a peerless young master. Many senior and junior sisters who practiced martial arts revealed infatuated expressions. However, the object of their infatuation could only be seen by one person. Gong Yimo was taking a break. Gong Che hurriedly passed over a water bottle. Such gentleness and consideration really made others envious. Qiu Xingfeng was dissatisfied. He stretched out his hand towards Gong Che. Momo is your master. I am your master's master. Why did you only prepare water for your master, but not for your master's master? Gong Che glanced at him. Seeing that this person could be considered his future brother-in-law, he stretched out his hand and asked the shadow guard to pass him a bottle of water. He also took the opportunity to pull Gong Yimo into the forest because he had something to say. The sun shone down. The two held hands, just like an ordinary couple. What's wrong? Gong Yimo smiled. You look like you have something on your mind. Gong Che thought for a while, then stopped. He pulled her and said softly, Immerse, will you marry me? Gong Yimo's cheeks reddened. She paused before asking, what happened? Gong Che's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. Nothing. It's just, I want to be with you as soon as possible. That way, she wouldn't have to worry anymore. Recently, for some reason, he kept having nightmares. There were several times when he woke up with a start. He thought that he had returned to the future, to the world where Mo or didn't belong to him. Every time that happened, he couldn't wait to hug Gong Yimo tightly in his arms. Only then could he calm the suffocating feeling. But Gong Yimo misunderstood his meaning. She glared at him and said angrily, You haven't recovered yet, but you're still thinking of improper things. Gong Che knew that she misunderstood. He smiled bitterly in his heart, but on the surface, he pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to look at her. How is it improper? Tao produces yin and yang, and yin and yang are in harmony. This kind of thing is in accordance with the will of heaven. He said it ambiguously, and his hot breath blew into Gong Yimo's ear. Gong Yimo's face was completely red, and she glared at him fiercely. Cut it out, let me tell you. Before you recover, don't even think about this kind of thing. Gong Che sighed and pressed her head gently against his chest. Then let's get married first, okay? He hugged the girl's waist. His tone was especially affectionate, but his eyes were filled with sorrow that Gong Yimo couldn't see. Gong Yimo felt that something was wrong with his voice. She couldn't help but ask, What's wrong? Because I'm afraid that you'll be snatched away. Gong Che's heart trembled, but he didn't answer. He only lowered his head to lift her face and kissed her lips. Recently, Gong Che had been asking for kisses more and more frequently, as if he was worried about something. His heart was uneasy, and only her kiss could bring him a trace of comfort. Gong Yimo could also feel his uneasiness, but it had been more than a year, and she had already trusted his feelings. She also liked him, so naturally she wouldn't reject his intimacy. If her existence could make him feel more at ease, then she was willing to put aside her shyness for the time being. The sunlight shone through the shadows of the trees and landed on the couple who were hugging each other. Everything around them seemed to have disappeared, and they could only feel each other's heat. Gong Che's movements became more urgent. His long body covered Gong Yimo completely, and he pressed her against the tree. He pried open her teeth and penetrated deeply. That domineering way of asking for kisses seemed to be declaring his sovereignty to everything around them. When the kiss reached the critical point, Gong Yimo suddenly thought of something and quickly pushed him away. Open your eyes. Gong Che's eyes were tightly shut, and he refused to open them. Gong Yimo was anxious. His body temperature was so high, and his heart was beating so fast. Did he think that she didn't know? Hurry and open your eyes. Otherwise, you're not allowed to get close to me in the future. Only then did Gong Che open his eyes. Indeed, his eyes had turned dark red. Chapter 851. His red eyes were obviously seductive, but at this moment, he was looking at Gong Yimo with an innocent look. Gong Yimo held back her laughter in her heart, but her expression was very serious. How many times have I told you? You can't continue after you're aroused. Your body can't handle too much emotion. Your eyes turning red is a warning. Don't even think about playing with fire. I'm doing this for the sake of your body. Gong Che was originally very frustrated. Because of this pair of eyes that could reveal secrets, he could only touch her lightly every time before being pushed away. It was really sweet torture. But Gong Che licked his lips and swallowed all the sweetness that belonged to Immerse. Then he narrowed his eyes and said seriously, Immerse, you said that as long as I'm well, we'll get married immediately. You can't lie to me. Gong Yimo chuckled. Why would I dare to lie to you? Be good and cooperate with Uncle Lee's treatment. When you're well, we'll get married. Gong Che's eyes lit up when he heard this. He couldn't help but exclaim softly and lifted Gong Yimo up. Immerse, Immerse, you're really too good. Gong Yimo was shocked and exclaimed, You bastard, let me down. Gong Che laughed. I'm not letting you down, unless you say that you want to marry me one more time. Gong Yimo was a little helpless. She could only say it one more time. Gong Che lifted her up and spun her around twice before finally hugging her tightly in his arms. Do you know? Gong Che's heart rate rose and fell. He had a bright smile on his face. His handsome face seemed to be glowing under the sunlight. I've never been so happy. Never. Immerse, all of this is because of you. Joy was contagious. Gong Yimo rested her head on his shoulder and smiled sweetly. Then you have to treat me well in the future. Gong Che chuckled and hugged her even tighter. I will treat you well because everything I have is yours, including my life. Gong Yimo was already satisfied. However, the good times did not last long. The two of them spent their days in a sweet paradise. As the situation in the capital became more and more tense, they became tense. Gong Che had received the emperor's handwritten letter. Although the letter only asked about his physical condition, Gong Che still felt that something was off. Coincidentally, at this moment, his subordinates brought news that the reason why they couldn't find the water cloud grass was because someone was one step ahead of them and drugged all the places where the water cloud grass would grow. It wasn't hard to imagine who was behind such a ruthless method. Gong Che's expression was ugly. All this time, he had subconsciously avoided that person because he was afraid that it would implicate Immerse. However, the other party had pressured him several times. If he did not act now, he was afraid that he would directly come knocking on his door. Don't tell anyone about this. Gong Che frowned, especially not Immerse. What do you mean you don't want me to know? Gong Yimo suddenly jumped in from the window and looked at Gong Che with displeasure. Gong Che, you dare to hide something from me? What do you want the water cloud grass for? Gong Che felt that something was wrong. He signaled with his eyes for the hidden guard to leave before pulling Gong Yimo into his arms and speaking nervously. Why would I dare to hide anything from you? My little ancestor, these are troubled times. I just don't want the imperial court's matters to affect the Jianghu. Because he had never lied to Gong Yimo, his words were dry and he did not dare to look at her. Gong Yimo looked at him closely until he felt guilty. Then she suddenly pursed her lips and spoke with grievance. Gong Che, you actually lied to me. There is clearly something going on. I heard everything. You have been looking for the water cloud grass. Why don't you tell me? Could it be that you don't believe me? Gong Yimo's pair of big eyes looked at him accusingly. Gong Che was shocked and hurriedly coaxed her. Immerse, don't be angry. I'll tell you don't be angry. Gong Yimo sat on the desk. Then tell me clearly. If I find out that you're lying to me again, I'll ignore you. Gong Che's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He did not expect that the thing he was most afraid of would still happen. His handsome face was tinged with sorrow and his lips turned pale. Gong Yimo saw him like this and could not bear to see him like this. Actually, it's a good thing. My illness can be cured. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up and she could not help but ask, could it be this water cloud grass? Gong Che nodded and a cold expression flashed across his face. But this matter, can you not interfere? Someone is controlling the water cloud grass and is waiting for me to cooperate with him. That person is very dangerous, and this is also a matter of the imperial court. Can you not interfere? But Gong Yimo frowned. From her point of view, she and Gong Che had feelings for each other. How could she not interfere in his matters, especially when the other party seemed to be very difficult to deal with? Gong Che suddenly stood up and hugged Gong Yimo's head to his chest as he said anxiously, "No buts." His voice trembled slightly. "Imoer, I beg you, don't interfere in this matter. I can handle everything, all right? I beg you." The uneasiness in his heart finally exploded. Every time he thought of Imoer liking someone else and being snatched away by someone else, he felt as if he was going to go crazy. He could not accept this possibility, and any signs of it had to be nipped in the bud. Gong Yimo did not know what was going on, but she felt Gong Che's body trembling slightly. She thought to herself, could it be that the other party was a very powerful person? Otherwise, why would Gong Che be so afraid? Seeing that Gong Yimo did not reply, Gong Che became anxious. He let go of her and held her face with both hands. He looked straight into her eyes and said firmly, "Emmer, promise me that before the Dai Yu State's War of the Princes is settled, you will not leave Mount Yunding. I can lose everything, but I can't lose you. Promise me." The uneasiness in his eyes seemed to be real. Gong Yimo's heart tightened, and she hurriedly said, "Don't worry, I promise you." Gong Che finally let out a sigh of relief. He caressed Gong Yimo's face again and again, as if this was the only way to ensure that this cute little person was his. Seeing her obediently allowing him to caress her, Gong Che could not hide the love in his eyes. It was as if he wanted to drown her. After a while, he finally calmed down and said slowly, "Imoer, if we can survive this disaster, let's leave this place and wander the world from now on. How about that? We'll go wherever Imoer wants to go and never come back." His eyes were too sincere, and it dispelled the uneasiness in Gong Yimo's heart. No matter what, Gong Che's feelings for her had not changed. The two of them talked for a while. After Gong Yimo left, Gong Che sighed. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and his expression became cold. After some consideration, he summoned a secret guard. "Make the preparations. I'll be going down the mountain in a few days. This trip will be done secretly, and do not alarm Imperial Father." The secret guard respectfully asked, "May I ask where your highness is going?" Gong Che took a deep breath and looked at the endless night outside the window. "To the Qi Manor." Chapter 852. The night was as cold as water. A carriage sped along the official road. At this rate, they would return to the capital in less than 2 days. A few days ago, Gong Che had just thought of going to see Gong Dai when he received an urgent letter from the emperor. As a prince, he had to return to the capital no matter what. Before leaving, he repeatedly warned Gong Yimo not to leave the mountain no matter what, and that he would return quickly. Seeing Gong Yimo agree, he was slightly relieved. Before leaving, he held her hand, but was unwilling to let go. No one understood how much he treasured this rebirth. No one knew what kind of gift it was for the heavens to suddenly send his beloved into his hands. In this life, he only wanted to hold her hand tightly and never let go. But this short parting was also for their future together. If he still did not appear, Gong Dai might come to Mount Yunding. At that time, he would truly regret his past actions. So even though he was extremely reluctant, Gong Che still left the mountain. He only wanted a strand of Imoer's hair hidden in a perfume pouch to relieve his longing. Unfortunately, was Gong Yimo a docile person? She had long predicted that Gong Che's journey would be dangerous. How could she leave him alone? So not long after Gong Che left, Gong Yimo knocked out the hidden guard guarding her and had Xiao Xingfeng lock him up. Then she left the mountain alone. Soon, Gong Che arrived at the capital. The capital was as bustling as before, but there were not many passers-by on the streets. Clearly, the urgency of the palace had spread to the common people. Gong Che did not stop. He did not even go to see the emperor first. Instead, he went to Qi Manor. When Gong Dai heard that someone wanted to see him, he guessed who it was. With a strange smile, he let the person in. This was the first time Gong Che had seen Gong Dai since his rebirth. From afar, Gong Che could see that Gong Dai's back was facing him. He was still dressed in black and exuded an imposing aura without being angry. But at that moment, Gong Che actually felt his aloofness. He would never forget that in his previous life, Gong Dai had him over, and he had been so full of metal. His personality was cold and aloof, but with Immerse around, he was never aloof. Gong Che still remembered the rainstorm that day. He was wearing a wedding dress and whipping Gong Dai in the rain. Obviously, he should be happy. It was rare for Gong Dai to serve his sentence in such a docile manner. As for this younger brother of his who always went against him, shouldn't he be happy to give him a beating? But no one knew how much pain he was in. He smiled and brandished his whip, but his tears blended into the rain. Because he had lost miserably, almost completely. That day was the day of his wedding with Su Miaoan. It was also the day Immerse rejected him again and resolutely went to Yuchi. He thought that he was jealous of Gong Dai. He was jealous that he could obtain Immerse's heart. That whipping was just a way for him to vent his frustration as a loser. Gong Ju's injuries were physical, but his heart was hurt. He thought of his crazy revenge on Gong Dai. It seemed that as long as Gong Dai was not around, Immerse would be his. In the end, Gong Dai burned all of his ships in one breath and finally escaped from under his nose. At that moment, he was about to go crazy. He had never hated someone so much. But if it wasn't for Immerse, Gong Che felt that he would admire someone like Gong Dai. Especially in this life, without Immerse, Gong Dai's true nature had been completely stimulated. Hearing the movement, Gong Dai slowly turned around. That face was still the same, but the handsome features gave people a kind of knife-like sharpness. Especially when he looked at people, there was a hint of blood. His red lips were bloodthirsty, and his black clothes were restrained. Gong Che could almost foresee that he was going to walk a path full of blood. "Royal brother, how have you been?" His voice was so rough and ear-piercing that Gong Che suddenly came back to his senses. A trace of complexity flashed in his eyes. He said softly, "I've already chosen to withdraw from the War of the Princes. Why are you still dragging me into it?" Gong Dai slightly raised his eyebrows. Those raised sword-like eyebrows looked at Gong Che with some surprise. The person in front of him was obviously different. In the past, Gong Che was arrogant and self-abased. He was gentle and melancholic. To put it bluntly, because of his awkward position, his entire person was tense. His words and actions were methodical, restrained, and pale. But now he was obviously different. His white clothes suited him so well, making him look as gentle as jade. That kind of brilliance that came from inside out was not dazzling, but it was hard to ignore. Who was it? Who changed him? Gong Dai stopped thinking and said with a faint smile, "There are many things that you can't get out of unscathed just by withdrawing." A trace of ambition flashed in his eyes. "With you, I can easily achieve my goal. Tell me, shouldn't I look for you?" Gong Che pursed his lips. He knew very well that for Gong Dai in front of him, if there was a shortcut, he would not let it go. "Now that I'm no longer the crown prince, what else do you want? But you're the son of the first wife." Gong Dai narrowed his eyes. After the first wife died, father did not appoint another empress. You're the only son of the first wife. Your bloodline can easily rise and pave the way for me. Gong Che roughly thought about Gong Dai's situation in this world. He knew that in this life, Gong Dai was rather passive. Gong Dai's maternal grandfather was far away in the West Continent. He was so sharp that his other brothers targeted him and saw him as their biggest opponent. This situation was not so bad in the past, but since Gong Che was demoted from the position of crown prince, they targeted Gong Dai more and more because he was the only one who stood out. No wonder Gong Dai wanted to ally with him. "Then what can I get?" Gong Che calmly met Gong Dai's sharp gaze. "If I pave the way for you, what can I get in the end?" Gong Dai felt that the person in front of him was really different. He pondered for a moment. For a moment, the two people in the courtyard did not speak. Then Gong Dai's ear-piercing voice slowly rang out. I want supreme power. As for you, you can tell me what you want. At this moment, Gong Dai was thinking that his biggest bottom line was to share the country with Gong Che after the matter was settled. But whether the final result would be equal would depend on Gong Che's ability. Unexpectedly, Gong Che laughed. I can help you. Because he knew very well that since Gong Dai had found him and spent so much effort to hold the water cloud grass in his hand to threaten him, he had no room to refuse. And after the matter is settled, I don't want any power. Gong Dai smiled slightly. He was suddenly very curious about what the person in front of him was thinking. Then what does Imperial Brother want? Gong Che looked at him and said seriously, I want you to swear that after the matter is settled, you'll let me go. I want to wander the world with my wife. You can never interfere with our lives. When Gong Che said this, the hands in his sleeves slightly clenched into fists. At first glance, he seemed to be saying that he did not want Gong Dai to disturb his life in the future. He only wanted to live an ordinary life, but he did not know that the word "we" was the key. Would Gong Dai agree? Chapter 853. Gong Dai was somewhat surprised. Do you know what I want you to do? How could he agree so easily without even thinking about it? Gong Che shook his head. There's no need. The best method is for me to take the position of Crown Prince once more and eradicate my dissidence so that I can be your shield. Gong Dai hadn't expected him to be so clear about what he wanted. That's right, he had been planning this from the very start. Ever since he discovered that the water cloud grass was of great use to Gong Che, he had no choice but to connect the two and speculate that Gong Che's illness could be cured with the water cloud grass. The strange thing was that Gong Che knew that his illness could be cured, yet he still withdrew from the War of the Princes. From this perspective, there could only be two reasons. First, he was retreating in order to advance. He wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight before reaping the benefits. Second, he was afraid. After all, apart from his direct bloodline, Gong Che had nothing else. Thus, he had used his illness to withdraw from the War of the Princes to save his life. After observing for a year, he realized that Gong Che had decided to cooperate with him because of the latter. Gong Che's final request was also very interesting. It seemed that he really did not care about fame or fortune. Seeing Gong Dai remain silent, Gong Che felt uneasy. He was afraid that Gong Dai would not agree, even though he believed that Gong Dai had no reason to refuse. Gong Che took a deep breath and calmly said, You still have the Li clan to support you. As for me, even if I become emperor, I will have no internal support and no external help. I will find it difficult to advance. But if I help you, the outcome will be different. Gong Dai looked at him with great interest, indicating that he should continue. Under the night sky, Gong Che leaned against a tree as he continued to speak coldly. The reason I'm helping you is because I value your potential. Once you succeed, it will be a meritorious service. If you're worried that I'll fight with you, there's no need for that. I know very well that I'm not suited to be an emperor. He paused for a moment. Moreover, I originally didn't want to interfere in this matter. I'm about to get married, and my wife and I both yearn for the life of the martial world. But since you've come to me, I have no other choice. So, I only have this one request. If you agree, you must help me with all your strength and be honest with me. Gong Dai said hoarsely, By then, can you really give up the power and position that you are about to get and give it away? Gong Che was calm and collected. If I was greedy for power, I wouldn't have exposed my hidden illness. Gong Dai suddenly smiled. Good, I promise you. Seeing that Gong Che was straightforward, his expression was rather pleased. After this is done, I'll set you free. Gong Che could not help but repeat himself. It's to let me and my wife leave. It won't interfere in the affairs of the martial world. It's a deal. It's a deal. After Gong Che and Gong Dai finished speaking, they didn't linger for a moment and left under the cover of the night. Gong Dai watched as Gong Che boarded the carriage. That steady bearing was really different from before. Gong Dai's expression was rather subtle. Did Gong Che change because of that wife? Gong Che's words repeatedly and inadvertently mentioned her. If it was really because of a woman, then he really was somewhat curious. After Gong Che boarded the carriage, he headed straight for the imperial palace. At this time, he was holding a jade box in his hand. Inside the jade box was the sincerity that Gong Dai gave him. If nothing unexpected happened, it must be the water cloud grass. Through the gap in the curtains, Gong Che saw Gong Dai's back as he turned and left. Every step he took was fast and steady, as if he was determined to get everything. He didn't know what he had lost. Gong Che closed his eyes and clenched the box in his hand. He suddenly had the thought of robbing Gong Dai's treasure. He smiled bitterly, but his expression gradually turned cold. Immerse was his. He didn't rob anyone. Immerse was his. Gong Dai, in this life, the country belongs to you. Immerse belongs to me. Helping you once is my compensation to you. With this mentality, he arrived at the imperial palace. When he saw the emperor, he directly explained his physical condition. After learning that Gong Che had found a way to treat him, Gong Chung was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered the imperial physician to study the formula of the water cloud grass. The happy event made Gong Cheng's somewhat morbid complexion look a lot better. Gong Che didn't forget that the emperor was still ill and stayed behind to express his condolences. Because he deliberately showed off, Gong Cheng quickly discovered that Gong Che was different. But after not seeing him for a year, his son seemed to have grown a lot. His speech was extraordinary, and his words were meaningful. It was a world of difference from a year ago. This made Gong Cheng very surprised, because in Gong Cheng's heart, he never had the idea of changing the crown prince. But the previous crown prince was really difficult to convince the public. It wasn't that he wasn't outstanding, but he had more than enough knowledge, insufficient means, and even less ability because he lacked confidence. But this time, he came back a lot more confident. In addition, Gong Che didn't hide his private property. Gong Cheng saw his son quickly become stronger and discovered that his ability was extraordinary. Unconsciously, some thoughts in his heart became active, but Gong Cheng didn't say it on the spot. The father and son chatted for a while, then Gong Che went back. Although everyone knew that he was no longer the crown prince, Gong Cheng's decree at that time said that the crown prince was ill and recuperating. Moreover, it was a congenital disease. It can be said that the crown prince's position existed in name only. When there was a new crown prince, Gong Che would be replaced. But now, Gong Che was still in name, so he still lived in the East Palace. When he returned to the East Palace, it was already late at night. Gong Che washed up and went to bed. He heard the bell in the middle of the night. They had only been separated for a few days, but he felt that they had been separated for a long time. The night was as cold as water. The palace servants had all retreated. The entire palace was even quieter, so quiet that it could magnify any emotion. His body was slightly sore. Gong Che felt as if something sour was constantly drilling into his body. He could only slightly ease it by curling up his body. Mo. He really wanted Mo. He didn't know how long he would stay here. Gong Che thought that as long as he had time, he would go to Yunding Mountain to see her. But he really missed her. Gong Che thought of his previous life. It was also a lonely night like this. He endured it alone and could only rely on his imagination to get through those cold nights. At that time, Mo wouldn't give him any response. He could only lie to himself again and again. Now, Mo would give him a response, but he didn't dare to bring her out. He was afraid that his Mo would eventually be snatched away by someone else. He really couldn't bear the pain of having her and then losing her again, but he really wanted to bring her out in front of others and announce to the world that she belonged to him. With the strand of hair in his arms, Gong Che couldn't help but hug the blanket and force himself to sleep. It was a quiet night, but a cold hand strangely appeared. She slowly reached into the blanket and then suddenly grabbed Gong Che's ankle. At that moment, Gong Che's body tensed up. In the next second, The dagger in his hand was pressed against the person's neck. His eyes were cold, without a trace of his usual gentleness. Chapter 854. Immerse. In the next second, the vigilance in Gong Chei's eyes turned into surprise. Gong Yimo clicked her tongue as she reached out to remove the dagger from her neck and giggled. Not bad. Your reaction is very quick. This past year, I didn't teach you for nothing. Gong Chei was both surprised and happy. He was surprised because how long had Immerse been with him? Had she seen Gong die? He was happy because he really missed her too much. He hadn't seen her for a full 10 days. Immerse. Gong Chei's body moved faster than his mind as he dragged her from the end of the bed into his embrace. He hugged her tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Gong Yimo saw that she was covered in dust and pushed him. I'm very dirty. If you hug me like this, you'll have wasted your bath tonight. But how could Gong Chei listen to anything else at this time? The person he had been thinking about day and night had appeared on his bed in the next second. Was there anything happier than this? After hugging for a long time, Gong Chei slowly regained his senses and said in a depressed tone, You naughty girl, didn't I tell you not to go down the mountain? You clearly promised me. Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Although Gong Chei was scolding her, she wasn't angry at all. She wasn't afraid at all. If you want me not to go down the mountain, then I won't go down the mountain. I want to... Gong Chei was anxious. He moved back a little and looked at Gong Yimo's eyes with disapproval. There was a fear in his eyes that he didn't realize. Then what did you see? Have you been following me? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. You seem to be afraid that I saw something? I'm so curious. What are you afraid of? Immerse. Gong Chei frowned and looked like he wanted to punish her, but there was nothing he could do. He was so scared that he was going crazy, but Immerse was not serious at all. She did not take it seriously at all. She didn't know. She didn't know. He couldn't bear the possibility of losing her, not even a little bit. Seeing that Gong Chei was really panicking and his entire body was tense, Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and mercifully stopped tormenting him. Instead, she threw herself into his arms. Because I miss you. Gong Chei's body tensed up even more. Gong Yimo smiled and acted coquettishly in his arms. I'm guessing that you'll be out for a long time this time. Although Uncle Emperor has given you many secret guards, you still lack a powerful fighter by your side, such as me. I can help you. Gong Chei's hands trembled as he stroked her back. His eyes were filled with unconcealable tenderness. His Immerse, she was wholeheartedly doing it for him, but he only wanted to hide her. I don't need you to help me. I just want you to be well and not get involved in these matters. Immerse, you're too disobedient. Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Because she was curled up in Gong Chei's arms, she did not notice how complicated Gong Chei's expression was at this moment. She only spoke unhappily. I came to look for you, and you're still scolding me. Humph, you don't miss me at all. You want me to leave, so I'll leave. Although she said that, she still firmly occupied the most comfortable position in Gong Chei's arms, waiting for Gong Chei to coax her. But this time, she was bound to be disappointed. Gong Chei was simply too afraid. Gong Yimo was so disobedient. He was really afraid that Gong Yimo would bump into Gong Dai. The result of being too flustered was that he suddenly flipped Gong Yimo over. While Gong Yimo was still in a daze, he gave her little but a slap with a pa sound. Gong Yimo was stunned once again. It wasn't because it hurt, but because she was used to doing whatever she wanted. She never thought that Gong Chei would actually dare to hit her. You bad girl, you don't know how scared I was. Gong Chei's anger was still not appeased after hitting her once. Thinking of how hard it would be for Gong Yimo on this journey and what danger she might encounter, he became even more flustered. With a pa sound, he hit her again. Gong Yimo's face turned red. Damn it, she had never been spanked by anyone in her entire life. Gong Yimo bounced up and used her inner strength to pin down Gong Chei. Her eyes were filled with shame and anger. You bastard, you dare to hit me? I protected you the entire journey. Using my Qinggong to rush over, afraid that I wouldn't be able to rush over if you met with danger. In the end, this is how you treat me? Gong Yimo got angrier the more she thought about it. She stretched out her hand and pinched Gong Che's soft flesh. Before Gong Che could cry out in pain, her nose was already sore. She was worried about Gong Che's safety and didn't dare to rest at night. She was exhausted from running around for 10 days. In the end, when she returned, Gong Che still blamed her. Forget it. She would pretend to be the good person. Humph! You bastard. Don't you want me to go back? I won't go back. I want to go out and play. I won't care about you anymore. But before she could finish her words, Gong Che hugged her. Gong Yimo struggled, but Gong Che simply hugged her and rolled around, pressing her tightly under his body. Silly. Gong Che was also angry in his heart. He was angry that she didn't cherish herself, but the happiness in his heart was getting stronger. When he thought about how she had been secretly protecting him, he couldn't help but feel happy. But when he thought about how his treasure would be exposed in front of Gong Dai, he felt an inexplicable fear. He was happy, shocked, and angry, but in the end, it was still sweet. But Gong Yimo didn't want it. You only want to coax me now? It's too late. You, let go of me. I'll count to 3. If you don't let go, I won't be polite anymore. As if I'm willing to follow you. I want to part ways with you. Her watery eyes were filled with anger, and her little mouth pouted. It was really indescribable. When Gong Che heard that, he panicked. But when he saw her delicate appearance, he couldn't help but smile and lower his head to seal her lips. Little thing, you still want to part ways? Gong Yimo protested. She pouted because she was angry, not because she was asking for a kiss. Why should he kiss her? But Gong Che ignored her protest. He quickly immersed himself in her sweetness. His actions were domineering and gentle, completely encircling Gong Yimo in his territory, not giving in at all. From her lips, to her teeth, to that cute little tongue, everything was wantonly claimed by Gong Che. Soon, his eyes turned dark red. It was too dark. Gong Yimo didn't see it, but she felt it. The emotions that were originally immersed in it disappeared, and she immediately pushed him away. You lecher. Aren't you angry? Then why did you kiss me? Gong Che laughed softly. His chest vibrated, venting his joy. I'm a lecher, but Imo climbing into her fiancé's bed in the middle of the night. What's that? He bit her nose forcefully and asked with a mischievous smile. Is Imo a flower thief? You're not a flower thief. Gong Yimo turned her head to the side. After this commotion, their anger had mostly dissipated. Gong Che knew that she was worried about him. Even if he was afraid just now, his tone shouldn't have been so harsh. So after his anger subsided, he said somewhat shamefully, Imo, I'm sorry. It was my fault just now. Don't be angry, okay? Gong Yimo thought that Gong Che had asked her to stay on Mount Yunding. Back then, she had agreed, but now she ran out. She was in the wrong. So after a moment of silence, she muttered, I didn't mean to disobey you. No, I'm older than you. I shouldn't be so childish. All right, I know you're just being impatient for a moment. In the darkness, the two apologized to each other. As they spoke, they suddenly looked at each other and smiled. Chapter 856. Gong Yimo had always been waiting for an opportunity to help Gong Che. But Gong Che kept a close eye on her, as if he was afraid that she would interfere in this matter. Now that the emperor's health was getting worse, the princes were constantly moving. With Gong Dai's support, Gong Che, as the crown prince, became the biggest obstacle in everyone's eyes. Gong Dai avoided everyone's gaze and secretly operated himself. In order to protect himself, Gong Che asked the emperor for the position of commander of the imperial guards for his subordinates. But even so, Gong Che was still threatened everywhere. Poisoning his meals was a small matter. Today, he was riding a horse to patrol for the emperor. But the horse was suddenly frightened. If Gong Che had not learned some martial arts and jumped the horse in time, the consequences would have been unthinkable. but he was still injured, injuring his left leg and lower abdomen. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Che's leg was injured, his face was pale, and he was lying on the bed reading documents. She could not help but feel angry. Gong Che did not notice anything. Seeing Gong Yimo's frown, he thought that she was worried about his injury. He could not help but pull her hand to sit on the bed and gently smile. "Don't worry, Imo. It's only a small injury. I'll be fine in 2 days." Gong Yimo saw his indifferent expression, as if nothing had happened, so she could not help but glare at him. "Yes, you're fine this time, but what about next time? Do you think you're a 9 lives cat demon? You won't die?" Gong Che saw that she was angry, so he quickly put down the documents in his hand and hugged her in his embrace. That smile made it seem as if hugging her meant that he already had the whole world. "All right, wife, don't be angry. I'll take good care of myself. Don't be angry, okay?" His mischievous smile made Gong Yimo very unhappy. He clearly did not realize his mistake. Gong Yimo could not take it anymore and pushed him hard. "Stop it. Are you stupid? You're already like this, and you can still smile." Gong Che thickened his face and once again hugged Gong Yimo tightly in his embrace and took a deep breath. "Imo, you will never know how happy I am right now." His sigh made Gong Yimo stunned. Happy? She did not understand why Gong Che did not want anything in the end when he helped the other party. Why did he look as if he gained something? Little did she know that in Gong Che's heart, he really felt that he gained, because he always believed that he was the one who stole Gong Ju's happiness. With this strange guilt, how could he care about the gains and losses? But Imo, she was his. Was his. But Gong Yimo did not know that. She felt unreconciled. She thought that Gong Che was controlled by the other party because of the water cloud grass. Did that mean that if she obtained the water cloud grass, Gong Che would be able to withdraw from this war? In any case, he did not want the throne. There was no need to fight for a stranger. With her own thoughts, Gong Yimo mumbled a few words and did not continue. Seeing that he had pacified her, Gong Che hugged her and continued to read his documents. He looked as if he had a wife and everything was fine. Little did he know that Gong Yimo already had her own thoughts. That night, Gong Che fell asleep. Gong Yimo carefully removed Gong Che's hand and secretly got up. She glanced at Gong Che and secretly made up her mind. She was going to steal the water cloud grass. She was now at the 4th level of wind and nature. There should not be many opponents in the world. Stealing a few blades of grass was not a problem for her. She did as she said. She sneaked out the door and knocked out the patrolling secret guards. Then, she rushed towards the direction of Qi Manor. As for Gong Che, he had a dream. It could not be called a dream. He was just reliving his previous life. On the day of Imo and Gong Dai's wedding, Gong Che did not know what kind of mood he was in as he sat there. He only knew that because of his reckless actions, Changshi was dead. His imperial father was also dead. Imo rejected him once again. She was pregnant with Gong Dai's child and married Gong Dai. He was the officiator of the wedding. Why did he feel so terrible? Looking at the woman he loved, looking forward to marrying another man. He did not even have the strength to struggle, because he had made a big mistake, because he had recognized reality. He understood that no matter what he did, Imo would not look at him. He could only endure and give up. Then he smiled and gave his blessings. His heart was bleeding. Every minute and every second seemed to drain him of all his strength. Not a single bit was left, no. It was not like this. In the dream, Gong Che's brows were tightly knitted together. Imo was his. Imo was his. He had liked Imo for so many years. His love for Imo was definitely not any less than Gong Dai's. Yes, Imo was his. He had been reborn. He had returned to his previous life. He had returned to the time before all the disputes. In this life, Imo was finally his. Gong Che finally revealed a pale smile. He reached out to hug Gong Yimo. However, he hugged nothing. A huge sense of danger made him open his eyes. He felt that the bed beside him was already cold. Imo had disappeared. Imo! He hurriedly got up. For a moment, He could not distinguish between the dream and reality. Could it be that he had not been reborn? Could it be that Emo had married someone else? Could it be that he was still alone? At this time, the shadow guard also woke up. He got up and kneeled to Gong Che to beg for forgiveness. Your Highness, this subordinate is incompetent. Madam, she seems to have gone to Qi Manor. Qi Manor, Gong Dai? At that moment, a huge panic enveloped Gong Che. He practically crawled up from the bed on all fours. In the process, he almost fell down on the bed because of his leg injury. Why did Mo go to Qi Manor? Could it be that he was not enough? Did she fall in love with Gong Dai? No. No. Gong Che forced himself to calm down. He thought of Gong Yimo's abnormal behavior today. She must have gone to steal the water cloud grass for him, because she thought that as long as she stole the water cloud grass, she would no longer be under Gong Dai's control. This silly girl. Man! In the midst of the panic, Gong Che's voice trembled. Take people to Qi Manor. Search carefully along the way. You must bring Madam back. Go quickly. Yes. The subordinate hurriedly carried out the order. Because Gong Yimo's Qinggong was outstanding, other than a few shadow guards, no one else was affected. They led several hundred people to Qi Manor. After Gong Che hurriedly put on his clothes, he also led a group of people out of the palace. He hoped that all of this was not too late. He could not let the two of them meet. In the middle of the night, the Crown Prince's men suddenly surrounded Qi Manor. Not only was Gong Dai very surprised, even the people watching from the shadows thought that there was an internal conflict and were waiting to see a good show. Gong Che hurriedly rushed over. Gong Dai, wearing a black coat, slowly walked to the door. It was obvious that he had just woken up. His sharp eyes swept over the people in front of the door. The two sides were facing each other, and there was a dangerous aura in the air. The newcomers were aggressive, as if there was something important that they had to force their way in. Imperial brother, what is the meaning of this? Gong Dai smiled coldly. Could it be that after being the crown prince for a few days, Gong Che wanted to burn the bridge after crossing the river? Chapter 857. Gong Che's expression was cold. With a wave of his hand, everyone retreated. Only he stepped forward and spoke solemnly. It was my fault for visiting so suddenly. Someone tried to assassinate me, and I brought men to pursue him. Someone saw him enter Qi Manor. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. He scrutinized Gong Che for a moment before beckoning with his finger. Someone stepped forward to await his orders. Diching, where's the little rat that snuck into the manor? Gong Dai's ear-piercing voice sounded even stranger in the night. Diching was the steward of Qi Manor, and he respectfully replied, Reporting to Your Highness the Crown Prince, an assassin broke into the manor just now. His martial arts were not bad, and his Qinggong was nimble. Seeing that he had stolen something and was about to leave, this servant had no choice but to issue a kill order. He has already been shot to death by a flurry of arrows. His body is in the rear courtyard and will be buried tomorrow morning. At that moment, almost everyone heard the sound of something breaking. Gong Che stared in disbelief at the steward who had just spoken. Under the flickering light of the torches, his face was completely drained of color. Dead? Gong Che's voice was almost inaudible. This was simply a joke. How could Immerse die? How could she die? Gong Che wanted to laugh, but he could not. In this life, Immerse's martial arts were far from the unrivaled level of her previous life. Furthermore, Gong Dai had recruited many strange people. Immerse might not be a match for them. But was that possible? If Immerse really died, if she died for him, a metallic taste flowed out from his throat. Gong Che suddenly forced his way into Qi Manor. His leg was injured and he could not exert any strength. However, his eyes were terrifyingly red. Under his oppressive aura, no one dared to block him. Gong Dai also discovered that Gong Che's situation was somewhat strange. He gave Diching a look, and Diching automatically led Gong Che to the rear courtyard. It seemed that the person who had died was not an assassin, but a very important person to the crown prince. His death would not cause the crown prince and the prince to turn against each other, right? Ditching thought with lingering fear. Gong Dai also felt that it was very strange. All along, he had been very suspicious of Gong Che's motives. He didn't want anything, only the water cloud grass and freedom. For these, he was willing to be his shield and promised to give up everything after the matter was done. To be honest, only a saint would be willing to give so much without asking for anything in return. However, Gong Dai was not afraid. No matter what Gong Che planned to do in the end, he believed that he would definitely be the final winner. But now, Gong Che actually revealed such an expression because of an assassin. It was as if the sky had collapsed. This was really strange. Wasn't Gong Che always gentle and amiable? In the past, it was to preserve the crown prince's bearing. Now, even if Mount Tai collapsed, his expression would not change. Who was that person that could make him lose his composure like this? Gong Che had never walked such a long road before. From the front door to the backyard, he limped along, his eyes staring straight ahead. However, the road seemed to have no end. It was pitch black and extended to the deepest abyss. In his bewitched state, he had already thought it through. If Imo really died, he would kill his enemy and then die with her. He didn't cross time and space to obtain his beloved and then lose her. That kind of person's life had no meaning. However, he also hoped that the one who died wasn't her. She wasn't so weak. She would never disappoint people. Soon, he arrived at the backyard. In the middle of the yard, there was a petite corpse wrapped in a straw mat. His pupil shrank, and he actually didn't dare to go forward. Ditching glanced at Gong Che's frightening expression and was slightly shocked. He deliberated over his words and said softly, "Your Highness, this is the assassin who forced his way in. Because he was shot to death by arrows, his death was terrifying. Your Highness, it's best if you don't go forward." However, before he could finish, Gong Che slowly walked to the corpse. He squatted down and reached out with a trembling hand, wanting to lift the mat. At this time, Gong Dai had unknowingly followed up and asked coldly, "Imperial brother, if this person is really the one you're looking for, what will you do?" His expression was rather solemn, because Gong Che's current appearance was too abnormal. That man who was emitting a sad and ruthless aura was completely different from his usual gentleness. It was as if he was a completely different person. When the half-kneeling Gong Che heard this, his back straightened and his fingers paused. It was unknown if it was because he was extremely tense, but he actually smiled. Without turning his head, he only said 4 words, "I won't rest until death." If Amol died, so what if the opponent was Gong Dai? Those who hurt her deserved to die. Only death could appease his pain. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, because they had never thought that one day they would hear the words, "I won't rest until death," from the modest crown prince's mouth. The fog in the night was heavy and the cold condensed, making it difficult to breathe. Everyone was silent. Just as Gong Che was about to uncover the straw mat again, Gong Dai suddenly sneered. "Forget it. You don't need to uncover it. This prince can guarantee that the person who died is not the one you're looking for." Gong Dai's words were like a ray of light, making Gong Che feel like he had come back from the jaws of death. He quickly turned his head and stared at him. "What makes you say that?" Gong Dai revealed a faint smile. "The only person who can make you like this, I think it's that wife who made you want to run away with her, right? The one who died as a man." Gong Che was shocked, and his hand quickly lifted the mat. The corpse was horrifying, but it was really a man. Gong Che was so overjoyed that he forgot everything. He did not realize that Gong Dai had already noticed Gong Yimo. He was filled with joy, as if he had been reborn again. Imo was still alive. She was still alive. Gong Che stood up and prepared to go somewhere else to find Imo. The moment he passed, Gong Dai suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm tightly. Under the weak light of the torch, the 2 equally handsome people stood together. Their gazes almost made sparks fly. "Is she the reason? Is she the reason why you selflessly helped this prince?" Gong Dai lowered his voice and asked. His expression seemed to be very interested in Gong Yimo. Gong Che reached out and pried Gong Dai's fingers apart. I can touch anything, but she is my bottom line. Since he had already been discovered, Gong Che did not need to hide anymore. He seriously looked at Gong Dai with a complicated look that others could not understand. This prince knows that you never understood why this prince helped you. Now you know? It's because she wants freedom. She likes the Jianghu. Then I need a healthy body to go with her. You want the country, so I'll help you. Because compared to her, the country is worthless. Those powerful words made Gong Dai's heart tremble. Men were born in this world, so it should be their innate ability to make a name for themselves. But Gong Che, for a woman, he did not even care about the country? Interesting, he was becoming more and more curious about that woman. Chapter 858. Not long after Gong Che left the Qi Manor, Gong Dai heard his subordinate Lo Qi's report. Your Highness, someone has broken into the secret chamber. This subordinate is incompetent and allowed him to escape. Speaking of which, he could not be blamed. There were only so many guards in the Qi Manor. At the beginning, the man who had broken in had been shot to death by arrows. Later on, the Crown Prince had brought people over. The two sides were in a standoff. No one had expected that a third party would dare to fish in troubled waters. Oh! Gong Dai glanced at Lo Qi and smiled. What did the intruder steal? Lo Qi said in shame. The water cloud grass has been stolen. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. However, he was not anxious. Back then, he had paid a great price to destroy all the places where the water cloud grass grew. How could he possibly leave all the remaining water cloud grass in one place? Gong Che's body seemed to be fine now. However, only the symptoms were treated and not the root of the problem. If he wanted to completely cure him, he would need at least 10 stalks, which was equivalent to 2 sets of medicine. Now that 5 stalks had been stolen, Gong Dai was very surprised. It seemed that Gong Che's wife's martial arts were not bad. However, it would not be so easy to obtain the remaining 5 stalks from him. After Gong Che left, he searched many places, causing the people of the capital to panic, until someone quickly reported to him that Gong Yimo had already returned. At that moment, everyone could feel the extreme anger after Gong Che's bliss. He hurriedly rushed back, becoming angrier the more he walked. He had repeatedly ordered her not to interfere. Even if she really wanted to do something, she should not have left without saying goodbye. Did she not know that he would be afraid and worried? Gong Che clutched at his slightly aching chest. Just now, he had really been afraid that she would die. That kind of suffocating pain could not be recalled. Just thinking about it made him feel as if his illness was about to act up. Gong Che thought about a lot of things. He even thought about confining her or sending Gong Yimo back to Mount Yinding. However, when he returned and kicked open the door to the bedroom, he saw the bloodstains on the floor and the basin of blood. At that moment, all his anger stopped. He suddenly felt as if something had dug out a piece of his heart, causing him to twitch in pain. He saw Gong Yimo pull down her sleeves in a panic. The traces of bandaging were so obvious, and there was still the smell of blood in the room. Gong Yimo sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him with some annoyance. Her pale little mouth opened and closed slightly. You? Why did you come back? She had only been back for less than 15 minutes. Gong Che didn't say a word. He just walked closer step by step. There seemed to be black flames spreading from his body. The closer he got, the more afraid Gong Yimo felt. Finally, she lowered her head like a little wife. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be disobedient. At first, she didn't realize how powerful the other party was. After walking around like this, she realized how powerful the other party was. Today, if she hadn't been lucky and someone had sneaked in before her to steal things, she would have been the one to be shot to death by the arrows. Moreover, when she returned, she saw many people looking for someone. It was obvious that Gong Che had woken up and guessed her actions. He had come to find her. Gong Yimo then realized that she was afraid. After all, Gong Che had repeatedly emphasized before, but she had knowingly broken the rules and caused everyone to be anxious. Gong Che didn't answer. He just knelt on one knee beside her and reached out to check her wound. Gong Yimo dodged, secretly complaining in her heart. Gong Che's expression was so scary. If he found out that she was injured, he would be even angrier. However, how could Gong Che allow her to dodge? Usually he was gentle and gentle. He was even more obedient to her. But now, he was very domineering and locked her up. Then, he slowly pulled up her sleeve. On her snow-white arm, the wound that she had hastily bandaged started to bleed again. Gong Che's pupils shrank. He held his breath and tried to untie the bandage. Gong Yimo held his hand and looked at him pitifully. Gong Che, I'm fine. Don't look at me, okay? Wouldn't the more he looked, the angrier he would be? Gong Che glanced at her. His eyes were pitch black like an abyss. That cold gaze made Gong Yimo's heart tremble. Her hands subconsciously loosened. The bloodstained bandage was peeled off layer by layer. A knife wound so deep that the bone could be seen lay in front of Gong Che's eyes. Gong Che's eyes instantly turned red. It was different from the dark red color when he was aroused. Now his eyes were bloodshot. He pursed his lips as if he was enduring something. Gong Yimo swallowed. The atmosphere was too oppressive. She would rather Gong Che say a few words to her. If he really couldn't, he could just scold her. This kind of silence was too scary. So, she held his hand that was holding her arm and pretended to be happy. Don't be angry. My injury was worth it because I stole 5 stalks of water cloud grass. Is that enough? She deliberately used a relaxed tone to say, if it's enough, you don't have to be that person's shield anymore. I'm really worried about you. Before she could finish speaking, Gong Che suddenly pounced on her. In the next second, he sucked on her lips. That ferocious kiss was more like a bite than a kiss. Gong Yimo cried out in pain. But when she opened her mouth, Gong Che took advantage of her weakness. Their tongues intertwined, and she felt as if her breath was being taken away. What was going on? She was almost out of breath. Gong Yimo couldn't move one hand. Her other hand was powerless to push Gong Che away. However, no matter how much she struggled, she couldn't push him away. Gong Che was like a wild beast that had been provoked. When their lips were entangled, there was a rusty taste. It turned out that Gong Yimo had bitten his lips. Gong Che was stunned. Only then did he raise his body to look at her. The tips of their noses touched. Her entire person was like a begonia flower that had been ruthlessly ravaged. Her eyes were filled with tenderness and unyieldingness as she looked at him angrily. It was great that she was still alive. She was lying under him and slowly blossoming. Gong Che lowered his head sincerely and gently sucked on her lips. His own lips were still bleeding, but he didn't feel it at all. He only carefully traced her lips over and over again. In his eyes, there was a pain that Gong Yimo couldn't understand. What's wrong? She finally realized that something was wrong with Gong Che. Even if he was angry, he shouldn't be like this. Gong Che didn't answer her. He only kissed her gently while stroking her hair. He tried his best to absorb the heat from her body, as if that was the nourishment that he relied on to survive. Emo. His voice was hoarse and had a hint of pleading. Why aren't you obedient? En? Why aren't you obedient? He thought that she might meet Gong Dai and leave him. He thought that she might be killed by Gong Dai. From then on, they would be separated by life and death. That kind of fear was like a thin thread that wrapped around every nerve in his body. Every nerve was stretched taut, but he couldn't do anything to her. Gong Yimo didn't know how to answer. At this moment, she also felt a little guilty. She shouldn't have acted on her own and caused such a big commotion. Did you know? Someone died in Chi Manor tonight. I thought it was you. Damn it. Why did you scare me like this? You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.